Chapter 408. So it's you. The man in the black robe said with a hoarse voice. What he said confused Chumu. An ear-piercing, buzzing sound rang out. The black-robed man's golden, long sword suddenly expanded to 10 inches. His wrist lightly flicked, and a golden sword flower blossomed. It left the sword tip and shot towards Chumu. The edges of this golden flower were full of sharpness. The man in the black robe had displayed an extraordinary sword art, which made Chumu's eyes brighten. He slightly shook his right wrist, and the speed sky sword stabbed out 20 times in a second. Every sword stabbed at a different spot on the golden flower, causing it to shatter and disappear into the air. The man in the black robe was at the peak of the Chi-Hai realm and had an extraordinary sword art. When he saw Chumu's sword art, he was so excited that he did not use his ancient sword art to kill Chumu. Instead, he used his sword art to fight with Chumu. Of course, the man in the black robe did not use his pure sword art. He used some of his sword chi and the mentality of gold, but he did not use his sword aura. It was unknown if he did not want to use it, or if he did not have the ability to. Chumu could see the excitement in his opponent's eyes. When he saw the man in the black robe's sword attack, he knew that he was going to use his sword art to defeat him. When it came to sword arts, Chumu had never been afraid of anyone. After destroying the golden sword light, Chumu lightly swung his sword. A dark golden sword light sliced through the air. The man in the black robe's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He felt that everything in front of him had disappeared. All he could see was a dark golden sword light that was growing bigger and bigger in front of him. There was no way to avoid it. He could only fight. The man in the black robe swung his sword back towards the dark golden sword light. The expected collision did not happen. The dark golden sword light was cut in half by the sword. The black-robed man's body trembled. His heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly brandished his golden sword, forming an airtight golden sword curtain. A light flashed in Chumu's eyes. He fully activated his perfect vision sword and changed his sword technique from a slash to a stab. The quick air sword transformed into a dark golden cold star that pierced into the golden sword screen. The impenetrable sword screen seemed to be in vain. The black-robed man's scalp went numb. His eyes only saw a dark golden color penetrate his golden sword screen and fly towards his throat. Before the sword arrived, his throat already felt a slight pain as if it had been pierced. The black-robed man was horrified. The golden longsword paused for a moment, and the countless sword shrunk into a single sharp sword that pierced towards Chumu. If Chumu continued to stab towards him, he would also be pierced by the black-robed man's sword. At that time, both sides would be injured. This meant that the black-robed man was not only ruthless to his enemies, but also to himself. Chumu's body flashed, and his sword changed from a stab to a burst. After the sword broke the black-robed man's longsword, he took advantage of the momentum and stabbed out at an even faster speed. In an instant, there was the sound of wind and thunder breaking through the air. It was so sharp that the black-robed man's pores almost exploded. He felt that Chumu's swordsmanship was extraordinary. Thus, he wanted to test out Chumu's swordsmanship. It would be best if he could kill Chumu with his sword. But now he realized that he was wrong, very wrong. This guy's swordsmanship was not just extraordinary, but unpredictable. The black-robed man could swear that he had met thousands of swordsmen in his life, but none of them had such swordsmanship. It could be said to be unparalleled. Although he was unwilling, the black-robed man already knew that in terms of swordsmanship, he was definitely no match for his opponent. In that case, he would use all his strength to kill his opponent with his sword. In an instant, the black-robed man's aura changed. A terrifying sword chi erupted from his body, and the strength of his protective sword chi increased to the maximum. The speed of the golden long sword increased, and the sword pierced towards Chumu first. This sword was extremely sharp and fast. If Chu Mu insisted on continuing to attack, he would be stabbed to death by the black-robed man's sword before he could stab him. In an instant, Chu Mu showed extraordinary adaptability. 1% of the sword chi was integrated into his sword, and his sword came into contact with the black-robed man's sword. The power of the stonequake was activated, and the high-frequency vibration immediately deflected the black-robed man's sword, which swept past Chu Mu's ear. The terrifying sharpness immediately cut off a few strands of hair, and a terrifying whistling sound poured into his ears, making him feel like his eardrums were being pierced. However, this did not affect Chu Mu at all. He threw out a sword attack, instantly breaking through the black-robed man's protective sword chi and activating the stonequake. Stonequake Wave Sword. Although the stonequake was still at the peak of minor completion, the power of the Sky Origin sword chi and the ripping poetic perspective had increased a lot, which made the stonequake wave sword much more powerful. It was too fast and too sudden. The black-robed man did not have time to withdraw his sword, so he hurriedly stepped back. His left hand twisted the scabbard in front of him, blocking Chu Mu's sword attack. With a boom, the sword chi on the scabbard was shattered, and a huge, vibrating power spread throughout the entire scabbard. The ripping poetic perspective increased the sharpness of the space speed sword to the extreme, leaving a clear mark on the scabbard, almost cutting it in half. The black-robed man's chi and blood surged, and his left hand went numb. He took the opportunity to retreat, and at the same time he pulled back his golden long sword and threw out a couple of golden sword chi at Chu Mu. He did not want to injure the enemy, but only wanted to stop Chu Mu for a split second. Chu Mu could not help but feel that it was a pity. Originally, this sword attack had the chance to injure the opponent. If he had only infused 1% of his sword aura into the stonequake wave sword, its power would have increased again. Unfortunately, the stonequake wave sword was a sword skill that had already been formed. It was composed of sword chi, ripping poetic perspective, and stonequake. Although Chu Mu was able to combine sword aura, concept power, and 1% of his sword aura into a single sword attack, that was only a normal attack. It was an extension of his basic sword technique. He couldn't merge too much of his sword aura, concept power, and stone-shaking energy into it, or else it would go beyond his control and hurt himself before hurting the enemy. In order to increase the power of the stonequake wave sword, he could only start from the sword chi, the ripping poetic perspective, and the stonequake. If he could add in his sword aura, theoretically, he could indeed increase the power of the stonequake wave sword. However, he would need to go through a period of comprehension to find the right way to infuse his sword aura into it. By then, it would be a brand new sword skill. Sword skills were different from sword arts. Sword arts could be infused with anything, but only a little bit of everything could be infused. Sword skills, on the other hand, had to have a foundation to carry it. For example, the foundation of the stonequake wave sword was the stonequake, which would be infused with other forces. Without the stonequake, it would not be the stonequake wave sword. If Chu Mu wanted to infuse 1% of his sword aura into the stonequake wave sword, it would not be something that could be done in a short period of time. Chu Mu could not afford to be distracted in a battle. His regret flashed through his eyes, and his body leaped up, thrusting out his sword from above. It instantly turned into a dark golden sword light, which was as thick as a finger, and shot towards the black-robed man. The black-robed man had just backed off a few meters before he managed to dissipate the vibrating power from the scabbard. Just as he was about to counterattack, his eyes reflected a dazzling, dark, golden light. The sharpness within it made him shiver. Space-shattering sword strike. Space-shattering sword strike was also a sword skill. Its foundation was the lacerating mentality, which greatly increased its power. However, it was still unable to infuse 1% of the sword aura into it. He would have to find some time to comprehend it and infuse 1% of the sword aura into it, increasing the power of the sword skill once again. The black-robed man's pupils shrank again, and he was extremely shocked. The power of Chumu's two sword skills was extremely frightening. The golden long sword vibrated and the air rippled out. Sword chi surged, and a rustling sound was heard in the cave. More than 80% of the gold mentality was infused into the sword, causing the golden longsword to release an even more dazzling light. The sword drew a circle in front of him, and layers of golden ripples spread out. The space-shattering sword strike was immediately stopped in midair. The black-robed man let go of the scabbard, and his left hand formed a sword. A golden sword light gathered at the tip of his finger, and he pointed it out again. It turned into a golden sword light and shot towards Chumu's forehead. Chumu and the black-robed man started to fight fiercely. The broken star sword art was performed, and thousands of broken stars started to rotate in the air like a river of stars. The black-robed man did not dare to hold back, and also performed his rank ancient sword art. Rays of golden sword light were extremely sharp and left clear marks in the air. Every ray of sword light was extremely powerful and could easily kill a low Chi Sea Realm sword artist. Chumu's protective sword Chi was pierced through, and even the feathery pattern armor was pierced through as well. This bought some time for Chumu to quickly dodge and counterattack. The two swords clashed many times, and the bright golden sword light and the dark golden sword light kept flashing in the dark cave. Countless sparks flew out in all directions like fireworks. The black-robed man was using an extreme rank sword art, and his sword chi was much stronger than Chumu's. On the other hand, Chumu was using a high-rank sword art. After so many clashes, the Rapid Sky sword was full of cracks, and its power was greatly affected. With a horizontal slash, the dark golden sword light turned into a crescent moon, and Chumu took this opportunity to put away the Rapid Sky sword and took out the Heavy Star sword. Now that he was at the low Chi Sea realm, he could use the Heavy Star sword without any pressure. Once the sword was out of the scabbard, suddenly, dark golden stars appeared in all directions. They fell bit by bit like falling stars. With the Heavy Star sword in his hand, Chumu's attacking power had increased again. The pressure on the black-robed man suddenly increased, and he immediately gathered the chi of heaven and earth. Every time he attacked, the chi of heaven and earth would help him, increasing his attacking power by 10%. It was also the first time that Chumu had used the chi of heaven and earth in a battle. Once he used it, a huge amount of chi came roaring towards him. Even the chi of heaven and earth that the black-robed man was using was affected, and was being controlled by Chumu. The black-robed man was shocked. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He quickly retreated, planning to leave the cave and fight with Chumu again outside. Since the space here was limited, the amount of chi it could hold was also limited. Once he used the chi, it would clash with each other. Since Chumu could control more chi of heaven and earth than him, he was immediately suppressed. If they were outside, where the chi of heaven and earth was endless, this situation would not happen. Sensing the black-robed man's intention to retreat, Chumu immediately took the opportunity and used the stone-shaking wave sword, sky-splitting sword attack, and the broken star sword art. With the Heavy Star sword in his hand, the power of his sword skills had obviously increased. With the support of 30% of the chi of heaven and earth, the black-robed man's long sword was knocked away, and the Heavy Star sword pierced through his body. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 409. As the profound star sword was pulled out, blood splashed into the sky. The black-robed man staggered back a few steps, his eyes bulging out as he stared at Chumu. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Finally, he fell down unwillingly. His heart was crushed by the profound star sword. His life force was quickly drained away, and he died completely. If it was before, Chumu would have used the dark red dagger to suck his blood dry. But after the secret of the dark red dagger was revealed, it no longer had the ability to suck blood. Without the ability to absorb blood, although the dark red small sword was still incomparably sharp, its power was greatly reduced. Adding on the fact that the dark red small sword was a keepsake of the central main sword region's Sword Dao sect, Azura sword sect, Chu Mu subconsciously didn't plan on using it again. After the black-robed man died, Chu Mu quickly took off the spatial bracelet from his body. It was a mid-rank spatial bracelet. It was obvious that upper-rank spatial bracelets were very rare. Then he searched for a while, but didn't find anything. He thought that all the valuable items must be kept in the spatial bracelet. He then put away the supreme rank sword. Then he slashed the profound star sword on the stone wall. Hot sparks flew out and landed on the black-robed man's long robe. It immediately started to burn, and soon it turned into a raging fire. The night was dark, and the sky was filled with stars. The night sky above the demon chaos plane was quiet and deep. In a guest room of the wind facing in the demon-shaking city, Chu Mu was taking a hot bath. There were a few leaves of the jade palm tree in the bathtub, giving the hot water a refreshing herbal smell. Ever since he entered the demon chaos plane, Chu Mu was constantly in the middle of battles. He didn't have much time to rest. Even when he was resting, he didn't dare to fall asleep for fear of being attacked. Therefore, in the past 2 months, his nerves had been in a tense state. Even an Iron Man couldn't last too long in that kind of situation. Otherwise, it would only bring about injuries to himself. It had been 2 months since Chu Mu arrived at the Demon Shaker City. His original plan was to reach the 9th revolution of the 9 transformations of heavenly essence within 3 months and break through to the Chi-Hai realm within half a year. But now, because of the battles and the dangerous situations, he had broken through the 9 transformations of Sky Yuan a month earlier than expected. After that, he had broken through to the Chi-Hai realm. Therefore, it was a good idea to go out and train. After that, because of the desolate sky fruit, not only did his cultivation talent increase to the 6th rank, his sword chi also increased from the initial Chi-Hai realm to the initial Chi-Hai realm. Even the 5th movement of the desolate sky sword body, the muscle chapter, was slightly improved and would be completed in a while. Soaking in the steaming hot water, Chu Mu's entire body was in a relaxed state. Because of the hot water, his blood flowed faster. Right now, his sword force had reached perfection, and there was still room for improvement. Once he reached the peak of perfection, it would be the sword intent. The sword intent was a very mysterious thing, even more mysterious and powerful than the sword force. The tearing concept had reached 60%, and its power was equivalent to 90% of a regular concept. There was still a lot of room for improvement. As for the cloud concept, it had reached 72%. Although it wasn't as powerful as the tearing concept, it could make the flying swan illusory space step even more unpredictable. The stonequake was still at the peak of the initial stage. Chu Mu had a feeling that he would be able to break through to the Deshang realm within a month. He organized his thoughts. His sword chi was at the initial Chi-Hai realm. His sword force had reached perfection. 60% ripping mentality, 72% cloud mentality, and the stonequake was at the peak of the initial stage. Plus, he could use supreme grade swords at will and could use 30% of the natural chi. His strength was more than 10 times stronger than before. Thinking about it, even a peak Chi-Hai sword warrior from the Moro sword sect had died under Chu Mu's sword. It could be seen that Chu Mu's strength was extremely terrifying. He even had the thought of going to the East Saint sub-palace to challenge for the Sword Hero title. Thinking about the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero, Chu Mu realized that even if he fought against one of them, he would not be a match for them. In other words, with Chu Mu's current strength, he did not have the qualifications to challenge for the Sword Hero title. However, he was only 20 years old. In another 1 or 2 years, his strength would definitely increase. By then, he would have the ability to challenge for the Sword Hero title. After this training is over, I will go back to my family first. Then I will go back to the sword faction. What I said that day should be fulfilled. Chu Mu thought to himself, but I don't know if senior brother Shao is still alive. If he is, where is he now? Thinking about it, Chu Mu gradually fell asleep. This time, he slept for another hour. The water was completely cold, and when he woke up, he felt refreshed and energetic. Getting out of the bathtub, Chu Mu put on a clean robe and walked into the bedroom. He took out the middle-grade spatial bracelet of the black-robed man. There were a few high-grade and 1 top-grade swords, 2 human-grade ancient sword arts, 1 earth-grade ancient sword art, 3 mystic-grade mid-grade sword chi arts, 1 mystic-grade high-grade sword chi art, and 1 mystic-grade top-grade sword chi art. There were also quite a number of spirit stones. Except for the top-grade profound sword chi art, Chu Mu did not care about the rest. This top-grade profound sword chi art was a metal-attributed sword art. Chu Mu looked through it once and put it away. It was useless to him, so he might as well keep it for future use. In addition, there was also a secret skill called the gold-piercing sword finger. Strictly speaking, it could be considered a finger art. Gold-piercing sword finger? Chu Mu was slightly startled. In the ancient sword continent, there were mainly sword cultivators, and they all practiced the sword. Besides movement skills and some secret skills that could increase strength and fly, the main attacking methods were sword art, sword moves, and sword skills. This kind of sword finger art was very rare, and it was also Chu Mu's first time seeing it. After carefully looking through the contents, Yichen realized that this gold-piercing sword finger could be considered a finger art. However, the Eastern sword domain did not have such a thing, and there were no records about it. Could it be that there were people on the ancient sword continent who practiced finger arts before? Chu Mu subconsciously had such a thought, but he soon shook his head. His understanding of the ancient sword continent was still far from enough. Only when his strength reached a certain level would he be able to come in contact with more mysteries. In any case, he could also practice the gold-piercing sword finger because he had the lacerating mentality. The golden sword light that the black-robed man had used his finger to perform should be the gold-piercing sword finger. Its power was also extraordinary. Chu Mu immediately decided to practice this secret skill. Besides practicing the gold-piercing sword finger, Chu Mu also wanted to study the stone-shaking wave sword and the space-splitting sword attack again. He wanted to integrate 1% of his sword aura into them to increase their power. Once he succeeded, his strength would increase by a lot. This time, Chu Mu directly paid 2,000 low-rank soul stones and booked a room for 20 days. Chu Mu had obtained a lot of soul stones from killing those Qi-Hai realm sword cultivators in the Chaoyao Mountains. Counting them together, he had obtained a few 100,000 soul stones. 1,000 soul stones were nothing. Plus, he had also obtained a lot of demon nuclei, which could be sold for a lot of soul stones. Chu Mu first practiced the gold-piercing sword finger. As the name suggested, the gold-piercing sword finger was related to the gold element. It needed to be activated with the gold element to be able to unleash its power. A normal sword cultivator would use the gold element sword chi as the main element and the metal mentality to perform the gold-piercing sword finger. Chu Mu did not have any gold element sword chi, but he had a variation of the metal mentality. The lacerating mentality was even sharper than the metal mentality. Chu Mu spent an entire day studying the gold-piercing sword finger. After breaking through to the Qi-Hai realm, his soul power did not increase, but he could feel that something had changed. It was as if he had turned from a rock into a crystal. His power of understanding had also increased. Even though the gold-piercing sword finger was very mysterious and was not any weaker than the broken star sword art, Chu Mu was still able to fully understand it in just one day. Then, Chu Mu spent another day thinking and simulating the gold-piercing sword finger. Because the gold-piercing sword finger mainly used the gold element sword chi and the metal mentality as a supplement, Chumu did not have any gold element sword chi, so he had to make some modifications. 3 days later, Chumu finally finished modifying the gold-piercing sword finger. He changed it to using the lacerating mentality as the main element sword chi and the Sky Yuan sword chi as a supplement. Although the penetrating power of the Sky Yuan sword chi was not as good as the gold element sword chi, the lacerating mentality was more powerful than the metal piercing sword finger. Using another 2 days, Chumu had finally mastered the gold piercing sword finger. Putting his left index and middle fingers together like a sword, a dark gold color suddenly condensed on the tip of his finger. The Sky Yuan sword chi flowed through his meridians and poured into the dark gold color, diluting the color and turning it into a golden color. The golden color became more and more intense, emitting a frightening sharpness. Chumu took out a middle-rank sword, and his golden piercing sword finger instantly shot towards the middle-rank sword. A dazzling golden sword ray broke through the air and instantly hit the middle-rank sword's body. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out, and the golden sword ray shattered. A small finger-sized hole appeared on the middle-rank sword's body, penetrating half of the sword. And this was the result of Chumu's initial mastery of the gold-piercing sword finger. If he could master it completely, it would be even more powerful, and it would not be a problem for him to pierce through mid-rank swords. Out of the 20 days, there were still 15 days left. Chumu rested for a bit before starting to study the stone-shaking wave sword. Using the stone-shaking power as the bone and the Sky Yuan sword chi and the tearing mentality as the flesh and blood, Chumu broke down the stone-shaking wave sword and studied it one by one. Then he tried to merge the 1% of the complete sword aura. It was a difficult process. If it were not for the fact that Chumu's comprehensive ability had increased after breaking through to the Chi-Hai realm, it would have taken him a lot of time. 5 days later, he finished his study. Another 5 days later, the new stone-shaking wave sword was created. Using the stone-shaking power as the bone, the Sky Yuan sword chi, and the tearing mentality as the flesh and blood, and the 1% of the complete sword aura as the soul, the new stone-shaking wave sword was even more complete and powerful. What was worth mentioning was that during this study, the peak level of the stone-shaking power had reached a Shang level, and its power had become even more powerful. With the experience of studying the stone-shaking wave sword, he was able to study the sky-shattering sword attack even faster. 3 days later, he finished his study of the sky-shattering sword attack. Chumu used another 2 days to train the new sky-shattering sword attack, using the tearing mentality as the bone, the Sky Yuan sword chi, and the stone-shaking power as the flesh and blood, and the 1% of the complete sword aura as the soul. The new sky-shattering sword attack was completely formed. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 410. After spending 20 days, Chumu had trained the gold-piercing sword finger to Deshang level. He had also successfully integrated the rock-shaking wave sword and the space-splitting sword strike into 1% of his sword force. Adding on the fact that the rock-shaking force had reached Deshang level, the power of these two sword skills had increased by 3 times, making them extremely terrifying. Until now, Chumu had a feeling that the sword skills he created himself were the most suitable for him. Those ancient sword skills were just a way for sword practitioners to learn. Of course, for sword practitioners with average talent who couldn't create their own sword skills, the ancient sword skills were a very good way to attack. But for sword practitioners with outstanding talent, the ancient sword skills were just a guide and a starting point. A true sword practitioner should have his own sword skills. Only then would he be able to fully utilize his own strengths and have the opportunity to walk on the path of the sword. Otherwise, if one were to always practice the ancient sword skills left behind by their predecessors and follow the footsteps of their predecessors, they would never be able to surpass the limits of their predecessors. It was as if he was trapped in a cage, unable to break free. Throughout history, which swordsmen who could leave their names in the annals of history did not break out of their shackles and walk on their own path of the sword before finally becoming famous. Chu Mu was now walking on this path. Until now, Chu Mu's strength had increased again. He estimated that a normal Chi-high sword practitioner wouldn't be able to block one of his attacks. Even if they weren't at the level of a sword master, the difference wouldn't be too big. To reach the level of Deshang with sword Qi is not something that can be done in a day. Now that I have completed the 9 transformations of Sky Origin, the next step is to cultivate it to perfection and purify my sword Qi. Unless I change to a higher level sword Qi, it will be extremely difficult to break through. Chu Mu stood in front of the window in the room, looking at the bustling street outside with his hands behind his back. He said to himself, I can't make a breakthrough in my sword Qi cultivation in a short period of time. If I want to continue improving my strength, I have to start from the root. My sword force has just reached perfection, so there's still room for improvement. I can also continue to deepen my comprehension of the concept. The other thing is to cultivate the heavenly desolate sword physique. The desolate sky sword physique had 7 chapters. Chu Mu had skipped the blood chapter and was now cultivating the 5th chapter, the muscle chapter. Muscles covered his entire body, covering an extremely large area. Refining the heavenly desolate transformation wasn't a simple matter. Chu Mu had been training for 2 months now, but he still hadn't finished it. However, according to his progress, within 10 days he should be able to finish the muscle section. Originally, there were still 15 ancient heavenly desolate pills left, but he had also used up a large amount of them. He estimated that after completing the muscle chapter, he would use up 10 ancient heavenly desolate pills, leaving him with only 5 left. Using 5 pellets to cultivate the skin of the 6th volume and the hair of the 7th volume was probably not enough. Fortunately, when he left the desolate city, he had ordered a large amount of heavenly desolate pills from the heavenly pill pavilion. When the time came, he would go to the desolate city to buy more heavenly desolate pills, and he should be able to cultivate the heavenly desolate sword physique. Once the heavenly desolate sword physique was completed, he would be able to cultivate the heavenly desolate sword Qi in the 2nd volume of the heavenly desolate sword record. I should use a flying demonic beast as a means of transportation. Chu Mu suddenly had this idea. Previously, he rode the red-crowned crane from the great Kuin sword mansion to the desolate border. When he returned to the Chu family, he also rode the red-crowned crane. If he were to walk, it would take a lot of time. Although walking was also a kind of cultivation, sometimes he was in a hurry and wished he could go as fast as possible. I have a mid-grade beast sealing pearl, so I should be able to seal a mid-grade flying demonic beast. Chu Mu said the red-crowned crane was only a low-grade flying demonic beast. If it was a mid-grade flying demonic beast, its flying speed would be at least 2 or 3 times faster, and it would be the best means of transportation. He didn't think of sealing a demonic beast to fight for him. There was no need for that. After standing in front of the window for a while, Chu Mu turned and walked to the door. After opening it, he went downstairs. First, he went to the counter and paid 500 low-grade spirit stones. He could stay for 5 more days. Even if he only stayed for 3 or 4 days, he could still return some spirit stones. The first floor of the Windward Inn was still full. Chu Mu strode out of the inn. He had already asked the inn's waiter where he could buy demonic cores in the city. There were a few shops in the city that bought demonic cores, but the biggest one was the Yang family shop. Their prices were also the most reasonable. Not long after, Chu Mu followed the flow of people and arrived outside a huge shop. The shop's signboard had the words Yang Ji written in vermilion. It was very eye-catching and left a deep impression on people. When Chu Mu walked into the Yang Ji shop, a shrewd-looking waiter immediately ran over and greeted him warmly. "Sir, what would you like to order?" The waiter didn't look very old. about 14 or 15 years old. His cultivation was only at the 6th stage of the Sword Chi realm. With such strength, it was impossible for him to hunt in the demon chaos plains. He could only be a waiter in this shop. We have all kinds of elixirs, swords, demonic cores, and all kinds of treasures here. Chu Mu was here to sell demonic cores, but when he heard the waiter's words, he had an idea and asked casually, "Oh, do you sell flying demonic beasts here?" According to his understanding, the Yang family shop was a very big shop that sold all kinds of things. Logically speaking, they should also sell demonic beasts. However, whether they did or not, Chu Mu didn't know. He just asked to try his luck. "Sir, you have come to the right place. In the entire demon-shaking city, only our Yangji shop sells demonic beasts. Not only do we have demonic beasts that run on the ground, we also have demonic beasts that swim in the water and fly in the sky. The waiter's mouth could run a train. Take me to have a look." Chu Mu's eyes lit up. He temporarily put aside the matter of selling demonic cores. "Sir, please come with me." The waiter was also very happy. The price of demonic beasts wasn't cheap. Once they were sold, he would also get a commission and earn a lot of spirit stones. Demonic beasts wouldn't be placed in the shop's hall. The waiter led Chu Mu inside. Not long after, they arrived at a more spacious place. There were huge iron cages on both sides. Some of the cages were empty, while others had demonic beasts inside. These demonic beasts were basically low-level demonic beasts. Moreover, each of them had a lazy look, lying down weakly. When Chu Mu and the waiter walked past, they didn't even bother to lift their eyelids. In addition to Chu Mu, there were some other people here looking at the demonic beasts, but there weren't many. "Sir, they have all been fed some medicinal powder. This powder will temporarily make them weak," the waiter explained. Chu Mu nodded. Otherwise, the demonic beasts would be very noisy. Not to mention, it would be difficult to trap these demonic beasts in these iron cages. "Sir, please take a look." The waiter continued. "Are there any mid-level flying demonic beasts? The higher the grade, the better." Chu Mu glanced around and didn't find any mid-level flying demonic beasts. Mid-level flying demonic beasts. The waiter was suddenly surprised. Flying demonic beasts were relatively rare because it was very difficult to catch them alive. High-grade flying demonic beasts were even more difficult. After thinking about it, the waiter's eyes lit up. 10 days ago, a mid-level flying demonic beast was delivered. I don't know what grade it is. "Sir, please come with me to take a look." Chu Mu followed the waiter and walked inside. Then, they stopped in front of a row of huge iron cages. Most of the iron cages were empty. They stopped in front of a huge iron cage. There was already a group of people who had arrived earlier than Chu Mu. One of them was from Yangji, and 3 of them were wearing red robes. They were from the Red Dress Association. They were discussing the price of the flying demonic beast in the iron cage. Once this wind-winged demonic dragon reaches adulthood, it will be a mid-level, transcendent, rank demonic beast. Moreover, it is born with the ability to control the power of the wind element. Its flying speed is 50% faster than other demonic beasts of the same level. It is an excellent helper for both traveling and assisting in battles. 5 million low-grade spirit stones is definitely worth it. The man from Yangji said, "You are right, but this wind-winged demonic dragon is only a mid-level demonic beast. It will take a long time to reach mid-level transcendent rank. Even if we want to increase its grade in a short time, we will need to consume a lot of demonic cores. Therefore, 5 million low-grade spirit stones is too much. 3 million. The swordsman from the Red Dress Association immediately retorted, "If that is the case, then we cannot come to an agreement." The man from Yangji shook his head and looked at Chu Mu. There was a hint of worry in his eyes. He asked casually, "Are you here to buy a demonic beast as well?" Manager Yang, this customer wants to buy a mid-level flying demonic beast. The higher the grade, the better. The waiter who had brought Chu Mu in immediately said, a mid-level flying demonic beast. Currently, Yang Ji only has this wind-winged demonic dragon. 5 million low-grade spirit stones. No bargaining. The man from Yang Ji said straightforwardly. He did not care if the price would scare Chu Mu. The 3 swordsmen from the Red Dress Association did not say anything. Instead, they looked at Chu Mu and sneered. No matter how they looked at it, they did not think Chu Mu was the kind of person who could take out 5 million low-grade spirit stones in one go. 5 million. Chu Mu frowned slightly. The price was indeed very high. Until now, he had never taken out so many spirit stones in one go. But after thinking about it carefully, 5 million low-grade spirit stones to buy a mid-level flying demonic beast that could grow to the super level was indeed a good deal. Killing a demonic beast and capturing one alive were 2 different concepts. To kill a mid-level flying demonic beast, perhaps 1 Chi High swordsman could do it. But to capture a mid-level flying demonic beast alive, even 2 Chi High swordsmen might not be able to do it. At least 3 to 5 Chi High swordsmen would be the safest choice. One reason was the difficulty of capturing a demonic beast alive. The other reason was the value of the demonic beast itself. Flying demonic beasts were definitely more valuable than normal demonic beasts, because it was harder to capture and more useful, not to mention a flying demonic beast like the wind-winged demonic dragon that was both fast and powerful. But Chu Mu did not have 5 million low-grade spirit stones right now. After thinking for a while, Chu Mu said, 5 million is not a problem. But I can't take out so many low-grade spirit stones in one go. Can I use other things as collateral? As soon as Chu Mu said this, the 3 swordsmen from the Red Dress Association widened their eyes and stared at Chu Mu in shock. They thought they were hallucinating. The man from Yangji was also stunned. He quickly smiled and nodded. Of course you can use it as collateral. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 411. The waiter who brought Chu Mu here opened his mouth, so wide that a fist could fit in it. 5 million low-grade spirit stones. Because Chu Mu was his guest, he could get a 1% commission, which was 50,000 low-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to several years of his income. Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? The younger of the 3 red-clothed swordsmen reacted and said with a disdainful smile. Although the other 2 swordsmen didn't say anything, their eyes and expressions clearly showed that they thought Chu Mu was boasting. Chu Mu restrained his sword chi fluctuations, giving them the feeling that he was only a chi transformation Deshang. They didn't take him seriously at all. How could a swordsman who had achieved the great success of chi transformation possibly have something worth 5 million low-grade spiritual stones? Although they had the money, it was still the property of the association. They had been sent here to buy this wind-winged demon dragon. The Yangji deacon also stared at Chu Mu nervously. As long as Chu Mu didn't really take out 5 million low-grade spirit stones or something of the same value, he couldn't really rest assured. The group of people stared at Chu Mu without blinking. They all had different thoughts in their minds. Chu Mu smiled slightly. Do we settle the bill here? Hearing this, Deacon Yang felt more confident and quickly replied, Yes, I am in charge of this demonic beast. It is my mission, so I can make the decision. There was positive competition within the Yang family trading company. Every deacon had a clear division of tasks. If they completed the task on time, there would be extra rewards. If they couldn't, there would be a certain punishment. In this way, the trading company was full of vitality and enthusiasm. This wind-winged demonic dragon was assigned to his quota and became a must-complete task. Once the wind-winged demonic dragon was sold, he could get half of the reward, which was 200,000 low-grade spirit stones. More importantly, he had made a bet with the other deacons. 13 days had already passed from the deadline of the task. If he still didn't sell it, not only would he be punished, he would also lose the bet. This was a matter of face and a lot of spirit stones. If it weren't for the fact that the Red Coat Society had pushed the price down so low, he would have agreed to sell it long ago. Unfortunately, the Red Coat Society had demanded an exorbitant price of $3 million for a wind-winged demon dragon that was worth $5 million. No matter what, he couldn't agree to it. After all, the trading firm had set a minimum price for him. If he sold it below the minimum price, not only would he not be able to obtain any rewards, he would also be punished even more severely. Now, there was finally someone willing to spend 5 million low-grade spirit stones to buy it. This time, Chumu was really bleeding a lot. He took out several silver low-grade spirit stone cards and a dozen bronze low-grade spirit stone cards. He also took out more than 200,000 low-grade spirit stones and tens of thousands of mid-grade spirit stones. Of course, these were not enough, but the 200,000 low-grade spirit stones and tens of thousands of mid-grade spirit stones on the ground attracted everyone's attention, causing their breathing to quicken. They could all see that this kid had a space bracelet. A space bracelet that could store so many spirit stones had to be at least of mid-grade. The 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen looked at each other, and a glimmer of light flashed in their eyes. Only they knew what they were thinking. Then, Chu-Mu took out a top-grade sword. Originally, he had planned to keep it for the Chu clan and give some to the Green Edge sword sect. Now, it seemed that he couldn't do that for the time being. After piecing everything together, Chu-Mu finally gathered the value of 5 million low-grade spirit stones. A large portion of the items in the spatial bracelet had been reduced. Basically, he had handed over most of the spoils of war during this period of time, as well as some of his previous gains. Fortunately, he hadn't handed over the sword chi manual, ancient sword techniques, and so on. It didn't matter if he handed over the sword, but the sword chi manual was the foundation. If he brought it back to the Chu clan, it could be used as a secret cultivation method passed down in the family. Okay, these spirit stones, the top-grade sword, the space bracelet, and so on, are worth 5 million low-grade spirit stones. Manager Young quickly finished counting, and an excited smile appeared on his face, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The worry between his brows also disappeared, and he looked at Chu-Mu with gratitude in his eyes. No matter what, Chu-Mu had done him a big favor. To be honest, this demonic beast is related to one of my missions. Seeing that the mission time is almost up, and I still haven't completed it, I'm very anxious. If I can't complete it, I'll be punished. Manager Yang's heart skipped a beat. I'll make the decision. The wind-winged demonic dragon will be sold to you for 4,500,000 low-grade spirit stones. Chu-Mu nodded. If he could save 500,000 low-grade spirit stones, he wouldn't refuse. The 5 low-grade silver spirit stone cards returned to Chu-Mu's hands. The 3 Red Coat Society swordsmen's eyes never blinked as they stared at the 5 low-grade silver spirit stone cards. Customer, this wind-winged demonic dragon is yours. Deacon Yang put away all the spirit stones and other things, then pointed to the demon beast in the iron cage behind him and said with a smile, this wind-winged demonic dragon lay weakly in the iron cage. Its entire body was light green, and its body was about the size of a bull. Its appearance was a bit similar to the pterodactyl that had existed on Earth a long time ago. Unlike the pterodactyl, the wind-winged demonic dragon didn't have claws on its wings. It had a pair of small front claws and thick back claws. The wind-winged demonic dragon is very fierce. We have to feed it medicinal powder every 3 days to make it weak all over. Manager Yang continued, our company provides door-to-door service. May I know where you want to send this wind-winged demonic dragon? No need. Feed it the antidote. Chumu shook his head and said calmly, "Customer, you can't do that. Once it takes the antidote, the wind-winged demonic dragon will recover in 15 minutes. By then, this iron cage won't be able to hold it." Manager Yang was shocked, and the three red-coat society swordsmen sneered. "Don't worry." Chumu took out the beast seal pearl. "So you have the beast seal pearl. No wonder." Manager Yang was startled at first, but then he suddenly understood. He quickly turned around and opened the iron cage to take out the antidote and feed it to the wind-winged demonic dragon. The three red-coat society swordsmen stared straight at Chumu, and the light in their eyes became even brighter. These three guys all had sword chi cultivation at the chi transformation realm. Chumu didn't care about them before, and now he didn't care about them at all. Maybe it was because he had become more confident after his strength increased. He didn't have to be careful in the past anymore. Moreover, these three guys clearly wanted to stay and laugh at Chumu. Maybe they were laughing at Chumu's stupidity for showing off such wealth in front of them. What they didn't know was that Chumu didn't care about them at all. The beast seal pearl had a secret method to activate it, and Chumu had already mastered it. When the sword chi entered the beast seal pearl, it immediately lit up and emitted a faint light. The three red-coat society swordsmen had only heard of the beast seal pearl, but they had never seen it before. They knew it was very precious, so they stared straight at it. Manager Yang had seen it before, but he hadn't seen it many times, so he also stared straight at it. The waiter's eyes were about to fall out. The light from the beast seal pearl formed rings of light, shooting towards the wind-winged demonic dragon in the iron cage. The rings of light expanded rapidly, and when they came into contact with the wind-winged demonic dragon, they were large enough to envelop the wind-winged demonic dragon. As if it knew its fate, the wind-winged demonic dragon started to struggle. Unfortunately, the antidote hadn't taken effect yet. The wind-winged demonic dragon struggled for a while and couldn't move. The success rate of the beast seal pearl was closely related to the level of the demonic beast and the user's strength. If a mid-ranked beast seal pearl was used to seal a low-ranked demonic beast, then it would be as easy as blowing off dust. But if a chi high sword artist was asked to seal a mid-ranked demonic beast, it would be very difficult. There was only a 30% chance of success. Therefore, when a sword artist wanted to seal a demonic beast, they would usually weaken the demonic beast by injuring it. With Chumu's strength, although he was only at the chi high level, his soul power was extremely powerful. His true strength was even stronger than a normal chi high sword artist. Even if the wind-winged demonic dragon was at its peak, Chumu would still have a 100% chance of successfully sealing it, not to mention in this situation. When the rings of light from the beast seal pearl had completely enveloped the wind-winged demonic dragon, the rings of light shrunk and bound the wind-winged demonic dragon's body. The wind-winged demonic dragon couldn't struggle and was bound. Its body started to emit a green light. Then, in front of everyone's eyes, the wind-winged demonic dragon's huge body quickly shrunk and turned into a green light that shot towards the beast seal pearl. With a shoo sound, the green light shot into the beast seal pearl and disappeared. The beast seal pearl shone with a green light. After 3 breaths of time, the light disappeared and a figure appeared in the originally empty beast seal pearl. It was a miniature version of the wind-winged demonic dragon, and it seemed to be sleeping in the beast seal pearl. Even Chumu, the owner of the wind-winged demonic dragon, was very surprised by this miraculous scene. He thought to himself that this ancient sword continent was indeed full of mysteries. The others, especially the waiter and the 3 swordsmen from the Red Coat Association, were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell to the ground. The sealing of the wind-winged demonic dragon was successful, and the beast seal pearl contained Chumu's essence blood. This meant that the wind-winged demonic dragon was branded with Chumu's essence blood. Unless Chumu's essence blood was forced out of the beast seal pearl, the wind-winged demonic dragon would listen to Chumu's orders. However, after the sealing of the wind-winged demonic dragon was successful, it would take about 3 days before it could be released. During these 3 days, the beast seal pearl would bind the wind-winged demonic dragon and imprint its essence blood. Manager Yang successfully sold the wind-winged demonic dragon within the time limit of the mission, and Chumu also successfully bought a satisfactory flying demonic beast. Both of them were happy. After a few pleasantries, Chumu said goodbye and left. Originally, Chumu came to sell the demonic cores to earn spirit stones. Now he didn't earn a single spirit stone. Instead, he spent 5 million low-grade spirit stones. In the end, he didn't sell the demonic cores because he wanted to keep them to feed the wind-winged demonic dragon. If the wind-winged demonic dragon's strength increased, it would be able to fly faster. After Chumu left, the 3 swordsmen from the Red Coat Association looked at each other and nodded. 2 of them chased after Chumu, and the other left in a different direction. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 412. There was never a lack of people in the demon-shaking city. Even in the middle of the night, there were still people walking on the streets. After Chumu left the Yang family trading company, he walked onto the streets and pondered the next step of his plan. His moon-white robe didn't attract much attention. In the entire Demon Shaker city, there were quite a number of swordsmen wearing moon-white robes. Although Mr. Yin had mentioned that the person who attacked and injured him was young and was wearing moon-white robes, he had only revealed his initial success in chi transformation. On one hand, 2 months had already passed. Many people had already forgotten about this matter. After all, the number of swordsmen in Yao Shaker City was constantly being replenished. Every day there would be deaths. There were also other matters, both big and small. On top of that, the sword Chi Chumu was displaying was that of a chi transformation to Shang. Although it was surprising, no one would think of it that way. Mr. Yin, I must kill this person. There is also the Wild Lion Gang. Since they want to kill me, they must pay a corresponding price. Chumu thought to himself, let's go to the Wild Lion Gang first. Chumu thought to himself. Originally, there was no enmity between him and the Wild Lion Gang. However, because the Wild Lion Gang was blind and thought that Chumu was a target of robbery, they died under Chumu's sword. If this matter was over, Chumu would not care about the Wild Lion Gang at all. Unfortunately, the Wild Lion Gang was not willing to accept this and sent out a group of swordsmen to kill Chumu. In the end, they died under Chumu's sword. This formed a grudge between them and Chumu. If he did not seek justice, it would be detrimental to his sword heart. Only when one's sword heart was clear and his mind was clear, could he walk further on the sword Dao. Stop! A low shout came from behind, and in the next moment, Chumu caught sight of 2 flashing red figures from the corner of his eyes. 2 people in red robes appeared on either side of him, and with a quick glance, Chumu knew that they were 2 of the 3 people in red robes from the Yang family trading company. What's the matter? Chumu glanced at them and asked indifferently, Of course, that beast seal pearl of yours is pretty good. Our guild master needs it, so you have to sell it to us. Don't worry, we won't let you lose out on the price. One of the red-clothed swordsmen said directly. He didn't try to hide it at all. His eyes were filled with naked greed. The moment the 2 of them blocked off Chumu, the surrounding swordsmen immediately reacted. When they saw their decorations, they immediately understood their identities. They retreated as though they were afraid of not being able to avoid them, forming a circle to watch the show. The Red Coat Association had always been arrogant and domineering. They did not care about reason at all, unless their fists were bigger than theirs. When they heard the 3 words Beast Seal Pearl, some swordsmen were confused, while others were extremely shocked. Then how much can you offer? Chumu asked with a half-smile. He already knew what the swordsmen of the Red Coat Association were thinking. Seeing that it's not easy for you, we'll give you a high price. The red-clothed swordsmen stared coldly at Chumu. They didn't feel that there was anything wrong. Perhaps they subconsciously thought that a mere chi-stage swordsman like Deshang wouldn't be a threat to them at all. As they spoke, they extended 2 fingers and said in a charitable tone, 2 million low-grade spiritual stones. Suddenly, there was a series of gasps all around. 2 million low-grade spiritual stones was definitely a huge sum for an ordinary swordsman. Some swordsmen might not even be able to earn 2 million low-grade spiritual stones in their entire lives. For them, 2 million low-grade spiritual stones was a concept that they could only imagine. It was inevitable that they would be extremely shocked. 2 million? Chumu thought that they would offer a low price, but he didn't expect it to be so low. He was a bit surprised, but then he said with a half-smile, a mid-grade beast-seal pearl is worth several million low-grade spiritual stones, and a wind-winged dragon is worth 4.5 million low-grade spiritual stones. Combined, the two are worth more than 10 million low-grade spiritual stones. How dare you call 2 million low-grade spiritual stones a high price? Is the Red Coat Association so poor that they treat 2 million low-grade spiritual stones as a huge sum of money? The sarcasm immediately embarrassed the 2 swordsmen in red. Then they glared at Chumu angrily and said in a threatening tone, "No matter who you are or where you come from, the Demon Shaker City has its own rules. In this place, the Red Coat Association is one of the 3 major forces. We have to keep our word. Hand over the Beast Seal Pearl obediently and leave with 2 million low-grade spiritual stones. Otherwise, not only will you not get a single low-grade spiritual stone, but you will also have to leave your life behind." As soon as these words came out, the surrounding swordsmen's expressions changed slightly. They knew that if this continued, there would be bloodshed. However, in the Demon Shaker City, this kind of thing happened often, so it was not surprising. They were all still immersed in Chumu's words. 10 million low-grade spiritual stones. Imagining the scene of 10 million low-grade spiritual stones appearing in front of them, many swordsmen felt dizzy and almost fainted. It was too shocking. The swordsmen all stared at Chumu. They wanted to see how this young Qi Deshang realm swordsman would deal with it. He looked to be about 20 years old and had a Qi Deshang realm cultivation. He also had the so-called mid-grade Beast Seal Pearl and wind-winged demonic dragon. His background was definitely not simple. However, this was the Demon Shaker City. It had its own rules. If they tried to interfere with it with external forces, it would only cause a backlash from all the forces in the Demon Shaker City. Therefore, in this place, they could only rely on themselves or the local forces. If they did not deal with it well, there would be bloodshed. The swordsmen thought that the one who would bleed would most likely be this young swordsman. They could not help but feel pity. "Stop!" A cold shout came. A figure pushed through the crowd and strode over. Chumu could not help but be startled. It was Han Yi. Chumu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Last time, when he was surrounded by the Wild Lion Gang, it was also Han Yi who came to help. This time it was still Han Yi. However, this time, Han Ye's appearance would not be of any help. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it is Gang Leader Han of the Iron Sword Gang. Gang Leader Han, do you have any advice?" One of the red-clothed swordsmen looked at Han Yi and said with a faint smile, "The Red Clothed Association was 10 times stronger than the Iron Sword Gang. Therefore, the Red Clothed Association did not put a second-rate gang like the Iron Sword Gang in their eyes, even if the other party was a gang leader." Han Ye's eyes flashed with anger, but he suppressed it in an instant. He cupped his hands and said to the red-clothed swordsman, "This is my friend. Please give me some face and let him go." "Your face?" The red-clothed swordsman suddenly sneered. His tone was disgusting. "Oh, I almost forgot. You are the gang leader of the Iron Sword Gang. You do have some face. But what does that have to do with me? I am a member of the Red Clothed Association, not your Iron Sword Gang." Han Ye's face suddenly changed. although he only needed to use his sword to kill these two people. Once he killed them, the Iron Sword Gang would be destroyed by the Red Clothed Association. Gang leader Han, since you are a gang leader, quickly step back. Otherwise, it will cause a misunderstanding between the Iron Sword Gang and the Red Clothed Association. You should know that the Red Clothed Association has destroyed many second-rate gangs. The Iron Sword Gang is not one of them. Another red-clothed swordsman said coldly. This sentence was full of threat, causing Han Ye's face to change greatly. The anger in his heart surged, but at the same time, there was also a deep fear. If he was alone, perhaps he would not be so afraid. However, other than him, there was also the Iron Sword Gang that he and his brothers had painstakingly built and developed over the years. At present, the Iron Sword Gang strength was far inferior to the Red Clothed Association. Once a conflict broke out, it would be easily destroyed, and everyone would die. With the fear in his heart, Han Ye could not say anything for a while. He was in a dilemma. On one hand, there was Chu Mu, whom he considered a friend. Although Han Ye had initially thought that Chu Mu had an extraordinary future and was worth investing in, he had a special characteristic. Once he considered someone a friend, he would be a friend. On the other hand, there was the Iron Sword Gang, which was closely related to his life. Between the two, he could only choose one. A hint of struggle flashed through his eyes. Han Ye already had an answer. He looked at Chu Mu with an apologetic gaze. Chu Mu faintly nodded his head. He expressed that he understood Han Ye's decision and could completely accept it. In the end, he and Han Ye had only met a few times, and hadn't reached the level where Han Ye would sacrifice his life to help him. Putting himself in Han Ye's shoes, Chu Mu believed that he himself could not do it. Since he could not do it, how could he ask others to do it? Han Ye had helped him several times, so Chu Mu had long regarded him as a person worth befriending. He also did not want Han Ye to provoke the Red Clothed Association and lead to the destruction of the Iron Sword Gang. There will be plenty of time in the future. A look of relief flashed through Han Ye's eyes. He only said one sentence and then retreated. Everyone thought that Han Ye retreated out of fear, but Chu Mu heard a different meaning. Han Ye was telling him to sacrifice a temporary benefit in exchange for a safe life. There would be plenty of time in the future. Unfortunately, Chu Mu had his own plans. If he faced a strong enemy that he did not even have a glimmer of hope to fight back, he might find a chance to retreat. There would truly be plenty of time in the future. However, these two swordsmen with the consummation of Qi transformation were nothing in Chu Mu's eyes. Even if it was the Red Clothed Association, Chu Mu was not afraid. Chief Han is indeed smart. Now it's time to see if you are smart or not. The red-clothed swordsman nodded in satisfaction. He looked at Chu Mu with a cold smile. Remember, be a smart person in your next life. Chu Mu said to the two red-clothed swordsmen with a smile on his face. The two red-clothed swordsmen and the surrounding people were stunned when they heard this. For a moment, they did not react. Soon after, they vaguely saw a blurry sword light flicker before disappearing in the blink of an eye. It was like an illusion. After a full 3 breaths, the swordsman finally reacted. Even Han Ye was the same. They only saw a moon-white figure gradually disappear into the distance. While they were very confused, someone suddenly let out a cry filled with fear. They saw a conspicuous flower of blood appear on the throats of the two red-clothed swordsmen. These two red-clothed swordsmen's eyes still carried a bit of confusion. Their bodies swayed, and then they directly fell backwards. As the dust flew, Han Ye could foresee that the demon-shaking city would become even more chaotic. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 413. Swords are weapons, and swordsmanship is the art of killing. This was Chu Mu's philosophy. Even if he did not kill the two red-clothed swordsmen, they would still continue to pester him. Even if Chu Mu left, they would still find ways to find him. At that time, it would not only be the two of them, but many more members of the Red Clothed Association. Since he would have to kill them sooner or later, why not kill them now? Chu Mu's sword was too fast. Even Han Yi, who was at the peak of the Qi transformation realm and was about to break through to the Qi high realm, could not see it clearly, let alone the others. The two red-clothed swordsmen did not even have time to react before their throats were pierced by Chu Mu's sword. The insides of their necks had already been destroyed, and it was not visible from the outside. Originally, Chu Mu had wanted to quickly search their bodies, but he did not find anything useful. He only found two high-grade swords. It seemed that the low-grade spirit stones they brought to buy the wind-winged devil dragon were with the third red-clothed swordsman, but he did not know where he went. As one of the three major powers in the Demon Shaker City, the Red-Clothed Association rarely died in the Demon Shaker City. It could be said that this had not happened in the past 5 years. The death of the two red-clothed swordsmen would definitely cause the Red-Clothed Association to be furious, and chaos would be unavoidable. As the fuse, Chu Mu did not know anything about it. He was on his way to the Wild Lion Association. By now, Chu Mu had already understood the distribution of the various powers in the Demon Shaker City. He knew the location of the Wild Lion Association very well. After a while, Chu Mu arrived in front of the Wild Lion Association. It was a manor that occupied a large area. On the closed red door, there was a sculpture of a mighty lion. It was so lifelike that it looked as if it would jump out of the door at any moment. On the left and right sides of the door, there was a middle-aged man with a sword on his back. They were both at the Qi transformation realm. There were also two majestic stone lions. On the plaque above the gate, there were two large golden words, Mad Lion, filled with domineering aura. Chu Mu didn't stop. He strode towards the main gate of the Wild Lion Gang. The two swordsmen who were guarding the gate immediately looked at him. Their eyes were as big as copper bells. They flickered with a sharp light, giving people an extremely strong pressure. "Stop!" one of them shouted. Chu Mu acted as if he didn't hear them and continued to walk forward. The two men immediately drew their swords and stared at Chu Mu with murderous intent. They shouted, "Who are you? What business do you have with the Mad Lion Gang?" They hadn't received any notice that an important figure was coming today. In addition, the sword Qi fluctuation that Chu Mu displayed was only that of Qi transforming Deshang. It would be strange if they didn't intercept him. Murder. Chu Mu replied softly. The two swordsmen narrowed their eyes and waved their hands. Their swords immediately slashed towards Chu Mu from the left and right. The two swords crossed and collided. Before they could react, Chu Mu flicked out two strands of sword Qi from his left hand. In an instant, they pierced through the throats of the two swordsmen, killing them. The two swordsmen's eyes were wide open and full of confusion. Their bodies softly fell to the ground. Chu Mu's palm slammed onto the thick vermilion door. With a pung sound, the door instantly split apart and flew inwards. It wasn't until it landed a dozen meters away that it let out a loud bang. "Who is it?" Behind the gate was a spacious front yard, and there were people practicing their swordsmanship. The huge commotion immediately interrupted them, causing them to turn around abruptly. They saw a moon-white figure walking through the broken gate with an indifferent expression. They also saw the two fallen swordsmen by the gate. They were already dead. "Who are you? Why did you kill our gang's people and destroy our gate? If you don't give a reason, don't even think about leaving this place alive." One of the Qi transforming Deshang swordsmen walked towards Chu Mu. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he pointed his sword at Chu Mu. The other swordsmen also walked over and surrounded Chu Mu. "Tell Li Guangshi to come out." Chu Mu stopped and said indifferently. He was not affected by the killing intent at all. "Take him down." The Qi transforming Deshang swordsman shouted angrily. More than 10 Qi transforming swordsmen moved one after another, stabbing or slashing towards Chumu. This was the Wild Lion Gang's manner, so they weren't restricted by the demon-shaking city's rule of not being able to use sword chi. The rule of not being able to use sword chi was to avoid unnecessary casualties or causing more grievances. However, this rule didn't apply to any gang's territory. In any case, the people who died wouldn't be unrelated to them. Therefore, the moment the Wild Lion Gang's swordsmen attacked, sword chi whistled and sword light flickered. It was as if they wanted to cut Chumu into pieces. Get lost! With a light shout, Chumu revealed a trace of perfect sword aura. That terrifying sword aura was like a mountain of swords descending and crushing everything. Even the chi transforming Desheng swordsman couldn't resist it and knelt on the ground in an instant. Needless to say, the other swordsmen couldn't even hold onto their swords as they knelt down. They were all extremely shocked. Li Kuangshi, I'll give you 3 breaths of time. If you don't come out, I'll remove your Wild Lion Gang from the list. Chumu let out a soft shout. His voice resounded through the 9 heavens like rolling thunder, instantly filling the entire Wild Lion Gang's manor. A trace of sword aura was fused into it, causing the shout to have an extremely terrifying aura. Even the chi transforming peak swordsman couldn't resist it. Inside the training room, Li Kuangshi's body was trembling violently. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned pale. His eyes contained a trace of fear, anger, and hatred. He was trying to break through to the Chi High realm and had reached the most crucial point. He was just 1 step away from breaking through. He didn't expect Chumu to shout at this moment. If it was just a normal shout, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, this shout contained 1% of perfect sword aura. The meaning was completely different. His mind was shaken and his breakthrough state was immediately destroyed. His entire essence, chi, and soul were greatly affected. Not only were his internal organs injured, but his meridians were also injured. Even his mind was injured. This kind of injury would take at least half a year to recover, unless he had some kind of treasure. The hatred in Li Kuangshi's heart was like a torrential river. He wanted to take out his sword and kill the person who had just spoken. He wanted to cut him into pieces. Unfortunately, he didn't dare. Although he was domineering, he wasn't an idiot. Just a voice alone contained such a powerful aura. How strong would the real person be? It was definitely not someone he could fight against right now. He quickly took a healing pill and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Li Kuangshi stood up and walked out of the training room with his sword. Who are you? What is your purpose in coming to our gang? A large number of swordsmen had gathered in the front yard of the Wild Lion Gang. Among them, there were more than 40 swordsmen wearing golden robes. Each of them was emitting chi, transforming peak swordsmen. They were the Golden Lion sword guards of the Wild Lion Gang. The person who spoke was also wearing a golden robe. He looked to be in his 40s. The sword chi he emitted was at the peak of the Chi High realm. He was very close to breaking through to the small Chi High realm. He looked at Chumu with a face full of fear and asked in a deep voice, "Who is Li Kuangshi?" Chumu didn't answer. He only asked calmly. The peak of the Chi High realm swordsman's veins bulged out from his forehead. His eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. "I am." A calm and domineering voice sounded out. A tall and strong figure walked out from the main hall with big steps. It was Li Kuangshi. His face was still pale, but his expression was gloomy. He stared at Chumu and asked, "Who are you? What kind of grudge do you have with our gang? Why are you here to cause trouble? 2 months ago, you sent people to kill me." Chumu said calmly. Li Kuangshi's expression changed. He looked at Chumu carefully and compared him to 2 months ago. "You are the one who was targeted by Slaughterer." The Wild Lion Gang has 2 choices. Chumu's words were equivalent to admitting Li Kuangshi's words. First, give me a suitable compensation that satisfies me, and this matter will end here. Second, Use my sword to bury the wild lion gang." The moment he finished speaking, Chu unsheathed his sword. His sword was like a falling star. A terrifying aura of sharpness emanated outwards. Everywhere it passed, the air seemed to be dispelled, creating a pseudo-vacuum. The surrounding swordsmen all felt it was difficult to breathe. Everyone, including the peak of the Chi-Hai realm swordsmen, were shocked. Under this powerful aura, they all felt small. The Chu in front of them seemed to have turned into a giant, an existence that they couldn't fight against. The swordsmen of the Wild Lion Gang all looked at Li Guangshi. They all followed Li Guangshi's lead, as long as Li Guangshi gave the order. Even if it was an enemy they couldn't fight against, they would still fight to the death. Li Guangshi was the first to bear the brunt. This pressure almost made him kneel down on the spot. If it wasn't for the fact that he had cultivated his aura for a long time, he would have made a fool out of himself. His expression kept changing. He clenched his teeth and was filled with anger and unwillingness. He wanted to order everyone to attack and kill Chu right here in the Wild Lion Gang. He didn't dare, he really didn't dare. This person's aura was too strong, and there was no way they could fight against it. Under this situation, even if they killed Chu in the end, there wouldn't be many people left in the Wild Lion Gang. How much compensation do you think is appropriate? Li Guangshi let out a breath. It was as heavy as a bellows. 5 million low-rank soul stones, Chu said without thinking. The surrounding swordsmen's faces changed, and their pupils contracted. Li Guangshi's veins were bulging, and he almost pulled out his sword to fight for his life. At most 2 million. Otherwise, the Wild Lion Gang doesn't mind fighting to the death. Li Guangshi gritted his teeth and growled like a wounded beast. This is the only time. If there is a next time, the Wild Lion Gang will be wiped out by my sword. Chu said lightly. Li Guangshi didn't say anything. Instead, he ordered someone to bring over 20 low-rank Soul Stones cards. With a wave of his hand, the 20 low-rank Soul Stones cards shot towards Chu. Chu waved his sleeve, and the 20 low-rank Soul Stones cards disappeared in the blink of an eye. He sheathed his sword and glanced at Li Guangshi. Then he turned around and left in big strides, leaving behind a group of Wild Lion Gang members who hated him to the bone. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 414. Chief. One of the elders of the Wild Lion Gang opened his mouth. Li Guangshi immediately raised his hand to stop him. He looked at the peak of Chi-Hai swordsman with a gloomy face and said, "Leader Li, what is this person's cultivation level? It should be above mine. It is very likely that he is at the Chi-Hai level. Deshang's sword Chi is probably at the peak of Chi-Hai level." The leader of the Golden Lion Sword Guards said in a serious tone, "I feel that even if we use all of our power, we will not be able to do anything to this person. If they were to fight head-on, they might be able to kill Chu. But don't forget that Chu was a single person. He would not just stand there and do nothing. Once he started to move, the battle would become more and more complex. In the end, the Wild Lion Gang would be destroyed. The surrounding swordsmen were all silent. Their faces were gloomy like dark clouds. They had anger in their hearts that they could not vent. "Chief, are we just going to let it go like this?" One of the elders said angrily, "Ever since the establishment of the gang, we have never been humiliated like this. 2 million low-rank spirit stones is a small matter. The reputation of the gang is more important. Once this news gets out, the reputation of the gang will fall. What is Leader Wang's opinion?" Li Guangshi's face was gloomy as he asked lightly. His voice contained the power of a storm. "Hire someone to kill him." Leader Wang said word by word. The killing intent in his eyes was almost tangible. This person is targeted by the Void Butcher. We cannot do anything, but that does not mean that others cannot. if we take out enough spirit stones to hire the demon sword Ghost Fog to kill him, even the Void Butcher will not be able to do anything to him. All right, I have my own plans for this matter. Let's end it here." Li Kuangshe waved his hand and turned to leave, leaving behind a tall and sturdy figure. That's right, if Chumu died under the demon's sword Ghost Fog sword, then the Void Slaughterer wouldn't be able to do anything to the demon sword Ghost Fog. However, if the Void Slaughterer knew that the Wild Lion Gang was the one who hired the assassin, then the Wild Lion Gang would definitely be slaughtered by the Void Slaughterer. Similar things had happened before. Right now, there were so many people here. Although they were all members of the Wild Lion Gang, the more people there were, the more secrets there would be. Even if Li Kuangshe was very willing, he didn't dare to take this risk. The income of 2 million low-grade spirit stones immediately alleviated Chumu's urgent need of spirit stones, and he let out a sigh of relief. Striding out of the Wild Lion Gang, Chumu wasn't worried about the Wild Lion Gang's revenge at all. The moment the Wild Lion Gang made a move against him, what awaited them would be Chumu's storm-like counterattack until they were annihilated. The first plan had been completed, but the second plan couldn't be implemented at the moment because Chumu didn't know where Mr. Yun was. After thinking for a bit, Chumu decided to return to the Windward Tavern first and use a few days to cultivate the muscle chapter of the Sky Desolate Sword Physique before proceeding to the next step of the experiential learning. Walking on the street, Chumu suddenly saw more than 10 red-robed swordsmen walking in the middle of the street. The surrounding swordsmen all made way for them. They were members of the Red Clothed Association. Chumu's gaze swept across the red-robed swordsmen and landed on 2 figures that were surrounded by the red-robed swordsmen, an old man and a young man. These 2 people were the grandfather and grandson of the Oak clan that Chumu had saved on his way to the Chaos Demon Original Road. The 2 of them looked very miserable. Their hands and feet were chained, and every step they took would cause the sound of the chains clashing against each other. Especially the old man, his injuries hadn't healed, and his aura was weak like a candle in the wind, as if it would be extinguished at any moment. The old man and the young man hung their heads dejectedly. They had been on the run for many years and had escaped from the tiger's den into the wolf's den. In the end, they couldn't avoid being captured. Chumu sighed softly and couldn't help but be moved in his heart. Since the last time he had used his sword to save the grandfather and grandson, there had been a trace of involvement between them. If Chumu had left the demon-shaking city and the Chaos Demon Original Road, he might not have met them again. However, since Chumu had encountered them now, and they were from the Red Clothed Association, which had a conflict with him, Chumu had no reason to stand by and do nothing. The thought of using his sword to save the grandfather and grandson subconsciously appeared in his heart. Chumu didn't forcibly suppress this thought and strode to the middle of the street, blocking the path of the red-robed swordsman. The Red Clothed Association is handling matters. Unrelated people make way. The leader of the red-robed swordsmen sternly shouted. He had the sword chi of the chi transformation realm. You make way immediately. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. The swordsmen of the Red Clothed Association pointed at Chumu and angrily shouted. Their expressions were stern and full of threat. Leave the 2 of them behind. You can all scram. Chumu's face was calm as he spoke, neither slowly nor quickly. The surrounding people were all shocked. They thought that he had gone crazy, daring to confront the people of the Red Clothed Association. The red-robed swordsmen were all startled. Then, as if they had encountered an incomparably funny matter, they began to laugh loudly. The grandfather and grandson of the Oak clan also heard this voice. They raised their heads with difficulty and looked over. When they saw Chumu, their eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. They didn't recognize Chumu. A mere chi transformation Deshang. Kill him. The chi transformation realm red-robed swordsmen waved his hand, and said incomparably coldly. In an instant, two people rushed out from the left and right. They drew their swords on the way and stabbed out. The two swords turned into red lightning that pierced towards Chumu. They wanted to pierce through Chumu's body, but they suddenly missed. The two people couldn't stop themselves from rushing forward a few meters and directly falling down. Blood quickly flowed out from their throats and dyed the ground red. No one saw how Chumu attacked. They only vaguely saw two red-robed swordsmen rush towards Chumu and pass by Chumu's left and right. They directly fell forward and bled to their deaths. It looked so inconceivable. The moment the two red-robed swordsmen fell, Chumu moved. His dream-like footwork rushed into the midst of the red-robed swordsmen in an instant. Everyone faintly saw a sharp and blurry sword light flicker like an illusion. The red-robed swordsman's eyes were filled with bewilderment and confusion. Immediately after, there was a chi-chi-chi sound. Flowers of blood bloomed from their throats, and arrows of blood shot out. The bodies of the red-robed swordsmen swayed and softly fell to the ground. Even when they died, they didn't have time to react. Chumu's speed was too fast, and the gap between them was too big. Immediately after, another blurry sword light flickered. Everyone only heard an obscure, clanging sound. The chains on the hands and feet of the old man and the young man were cut. The cut was incomparably smooth and could almost be used as a mirror. "Let's go." Chumu glanced at the O family's grandfather and grandson and indifferently said. The old man and the young man hadn't completely reacted. Their faces were filled with bewilderment and confusion. When they heard Chumu's words, they were suddenly startled. They quickly reacted and hurriedly stepped forward to follow Chumu. However, they were all injured. In addition to various other reasons, they walked very slowly. It was quite difficult for them to walk as they staggered. No one dared to obstruct them. All the swordsmen automatically made way for Chumu's group to pass. It didn't matter whether this person would eventually die under the revenge of the Red-Robed Association. At least for now, he was an extremely fierce and terrifying person. He didn't even put the Red-Robed Association in his eyes. If he wanted to kill someone, he would kill them without the slightest hesitation. The O family's grandfather and grandson followed closely behind Chumu and arrived at the Windward Tavern after a long period of time. They didn't know who Chumu was. They didn't know what Chumu's identity was. They also didn't know what Chumu's purpose was in saving them. However, they had no choice but to follow Chumu. They had no one to rely on, and they were very weak. Chumu was the one who had saved them. It was as if he had stretched out a hand to grab them when they were about to fall into the abyss of despair. He had pulled them up. Therefore, they chose to believe in Chumu. This was a kind of helpless choice when they were at the end of their rope. Chumu spent some low-grade spirit stones to open a guest room for the grandfather and grandson pair. He let them stay in the room and tidied it up. He also asked the waiter to deliver some food and drinks to them. After doing all this, Chumu didn't care anymore. Instead, he stayed in his room and quietly cultivated. He took the ancient, desolate pill to temper his muscles. In another guest room, the O family's grandfather and grandson pair were eating food. The youth looked like a reincarnated hungry ghost because they hadn't eaten for several days. They were almost starving to death. If it wasn't for their injuries and lack of food, they wouldn't have been so easily found and captured by the Red-Robed Association. Now there was nothing to say. In the end, they were still captured. If it wasn't for Chumu's help, they would have been brought back to the Red-Robed Association and become prisoners. At that time, what kind of fate would be waiting for them? They couldn't be sure. They could only guess that it would be terrible. Perhaps it would be a dead end. "Grandfather, eat this. It's delicious." The O family's youth pushed the delicious food in front of the O family's old man while eating. "You eat. Grandfather can't eat that much." Although the O family's old man also wanted to open his mouth and eat wildly, he was old and heavily injured. If it wasn't for him forcefully suppressing it, he was afraid that it would explode and take his old life. Even now, he was forcefully suppressing his heavy injuries and barely moving. He was like a candle in the wind. The O family's youth was starving. He kept eating and almost choked. The O family's old man was slowly chewing and thinking with a serious expression. He knew his own body's condition. However, the O family couldn't be without descendants. Therefore, he could die, but his grandson must live. Otherwise, the O family would be completely gone. He was also very clear that whether the O family would be without descendants was no longer up to him. Instead, it was up to the person who saved them. If he was willing to help, perhaps the O family wouldn't be without descendants. Thinking of this, the O family's old man couldn't eat anymore and immediately stood up. "Grandfather, why aren't you eating? What are you doing?" The O family's youth was startled and quickly asked, "Luo, go out with grandfather. You can eat later," the O family's old man said. He coughed a few times and walked towards the door. When he opened the door, the O family's youth immediately thought of his grandfather's plan. So he immediately stood up and walked out of the door. Their guest room wasn't far from Chu Mu's guest room. It was only a few steps away. So they quickly arrived in front of Chu Mu's room. Then they raised their hands and knocked on the door. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 415. Chu Mu stopped cultivating. His body didn't move. He shot out sword energy with one hand. The sword energy was very ingenious after it was shot out. It opened the door bolt without damaging it. Other swordsmen would have been shocked if they had seen this. What precise control of sword energy! This required not only a pure sword energy, but also sufficient control of sword energy. It also required an incomparably strong will. The majority of swordsmen couldn't achieve this. The old man and the young man of the O clan were somewhat nervous after the door was opened. They took a deep breath and stepped into Chu Mu's room. "Thank you for saving us." Old man O bowed to Chu Mu as soon as he entered the room. The young man of the O clan knelt down and kowtowed. It was as if he had been given a new life. "Get up. I didn't expect to see you here," Chu Mu said with a faint smile. Old man O and the young man of the O clan were startled. They had heard Chu Mu's words. It wasn't the first time he had seen them. Old man O's eyes flashed with excitement. He didn't dare to be sure. "You are—" The young man of the O clan's eyes also lit up because he had also thought of something. "It's me," Chu Mu nodded and admitted bluntly. "It's really you." Old man O had changed the way he addressed Chu Mu from you to you. This change showed his deep gratitude and respect for Chu Mu. Twice. The two of them had already been saved by Chu Mu twice. Moreover, after learning that Chu Mu was that person from last time, they had relaxed. Subconsciously, "Sit down," Chu Mu said. The O clan's grandfather and grandson sat down on a chair. They told Chu Mu what had happened after that. It turned out that this pair of grandfather and grandson had actually followed Chu Mu all the way to the Demon Shaker City. However, Chu Mu's speed was too fast. One of them was injured, so his speed was very slow. Coupled with the pursuit of the Red Coat Association, they had no choice but to take a long detour. In the end, he was unable to escape the Red Coat Association's pursuit. He fell into the hands of the members of the Red Coat Association and was brought to Demon Shaker City. He had originally despaired, but he did not expect to coincidentally bump into Chu Mu. Once again, he was saved by Chu Mu. In fact, if the other two first-rate forces other than the Red Coat Association had captured the grandfather and grandson of the O family, Chu Mu might not have done anything. There were some factors involved in offending the Red Coat Association. There was no need to find trouble and offend other first-rate forces. It had to be said that the O family's grandfather and grandson were very unlucky. They actually followed Chu Mu and ended up being captured by the Red Coat Association. Their luck? was also very good as they met Chumu again. Benefactor, I know that you look down on the O family's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. However, I am unable to repay the favor of saving my life twice. The old man of the O family said with an incomparably emotional tone. He coughed a few times. Chumu could see that his injuries were extremely serious. He was completely forcefully holding on. The young man of the O family quickly used his palm to stroke the old man's back. Chumu did not say anything. He had saved people based on his own heart. He did not care about repayment. Of course, the repayment that Chumu wanted the most was a sword forging grandmaster to forge his desolate sky sword. Old Master O's hand trembled as he reached into his bosom. After a while, he took out a very thin piece of paper and handed it to Chumu. Grandfather. The young man of the O family's pupils immediately contracted when he saw the piece of paper. Chumu glanced at Old Master O and took the paper. His gaze fell on that piece of paper. He took a look and saw that the entire piece of paper was filled with densely packed words. It looked very strange. It would easily cause people to have a feeling of confusion and dizziness. Chumu quickly withdrew his gaze. Only then did the dizziness disappear. His heart was very surprised and had a trace of fear. Benefactor, this piece of paper recorded the O family's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. Old Master O forcibly stopped coughing. He used an incomparably cautious tone and solemnly stared at Chumu. He said, "Ever since the O family was annihilated, I have been carrying this piece of paper and fleeing with Aluo. Other than the patriarch of each generation, an inheritor of the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. No one else knew that the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was recorded on this piece of paper." Chumu's expression went blank. Now that she said it, this heaven-shaking fusion energy forging sword technique was truly mysterious. Originally, Chumu only thought that the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was an amazing sword forging technique. But now it seemed that there was another secret. Otherwise, the O family wouldn't be so cautious. Rumor has it that the ancestors of the O family actually came from the central main sword domain. Old Master, O said again. Revealing a big secret made Chumu dizzy. Even the young man of the O family was very shocked. It seemed that he didn't know. If the ancestors of the O family came from the central main sword domain, then this heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was very likely to come from the central main sword domain. To many swordsmen, the central main sword domain was a paradise for the way of the sword. It was a place that people yearned for. The items that were produced in the central main sword domain would often be automatically shrouded in a mysterious halo. The history of the O family's ancestors can no longer be investigated. The only thing that has been passed down is this piece of paper. The heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique recorded on it is actually only a fragment. Old Master O continued, "This is the heirloom of the O family. It is also the only proof that the O family recognizes its ancestors. Our O family's ancestors had a wish, and that was to recognize their ancestors. But now it is impossible. This thing is the source of a disaster. Because of it, the O family was exterminated. Only the two of us are left. We fled here for a few years." Old Master O coughed again while speaking. This time he actually coughed up blood. "Old Master, you should rest first. Recuperate from your injuries first." Chumu promptly said, No need. I know my own injuries. I won't be able to hold on until today." Old Master O wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at Chumu with pleading eyes. He continued, "With Benefactor's intelligence, you already know what this old man means. The O family's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique will be given to you. This old man earnestly asks Benefactor to take Aluo in. If Benefactor feels that Aluo is a burden, then arrange a place for Aluo so that he can live peacefully for the rest of his life. Old Master O coughed again while speaking. This time he coughed up even more blood. The O family's youngster sobbed. Because I have always hidden this piece of paper inside my robe, it is very well hidden. The people of the Red Clothed Association didn't find it at all. They took away my spatial bracelet and thought that the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was hidden inside. Old Master O sat down with the help of the O family's youngster. Even if we continue to stay here, we will only bring disaster upon ourselves. Benefactor is young and has extraordinary strength. You must have a great origin. You also have enough strength to protect this heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. Chumu didn't agree immediately because of Old Master O's injuries. He was thinking because this was related to a lot of things. The matter was very obvious. If he agreed to Old Master O's request, then the heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique would be his. In fact, Chumu was very interested in this heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. It should be said that this piece of paper had aroused his curiosity. With Chumu's strength, now that this piece of paper was in his hands, he could take it for himself and deal with the O family's grandfather and grandson. However, his sword path and sword heart didn't allow him to do so. He didn't even think about it. Two choices were placed in front of Chumu. First, if he agreed to Old Master O's request, he could obtain this piece of paper. However, the conflict between him and the Red Clothed Association would intensify again. He might even provoke some more powerful forces and cause endless trouble. Of course, this was only a guess. Perhaps other than the Red Clothed Association, no other forces knew. In addition, he had to settle down the young man from the O family. This was also a neither big nor small troublesome matter. Second, he had to return this piece of paper to Old Master O and let them leave. After that, the so-called heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique would have nothing to do with him. Of course, the conflict between him and the Red Clothed Association would still exist and still had to be resolved. Old Master O's coughs continuously sounded. After a full 10 breaths, Chumu made a decision. I agree, Chumu said indifferently and put the piece of paper into his interspatial bracelet. At the same time, Old Master O spat out a mouthful of blood and completely dyed the ground in front of him red. His face instantly turned pale, but he revealed a gratified expression as if he had been relieved of a burden. It was as if he had put down a burden. He looked at Chumu with eyes full of gratitude and then looked at the sobbing young man from the O family. He raised a trembling hand and gently stroked the young man's head. Aluo, you'll follow your benefactor in the future. You have to accept whatever arrangements he makes. Aluo nodded repeatedly and could not say a word. Chumu did not say a word. He looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He could see that Old Master O's injuries were very serious. Even if he took out a pill, he would not be able to heal him unless he had some kind of rare treasure. However, rare treasures were things that could only be encountered by chance. Even if there were clues, there was no place to find them. Old Master O also could not let go of his grandson, so he relied on his willpower to hold on until now. Now that Chumu had agreed, his grandson's safety was finally guaranteed in the future. He could finally be at ease. Once he relaxed, he could not suppress his injuries and vomited blood and died. Suddenly, the whole room was filled with a sorrowful aura. A dead person can't be brought back to life. My condolences. Chumu sighed softly and said, Your grandfather's biggest wish is that you can live on. As long as you live on and live well, it will be your grandfather's greatest reward. Chumu did not know why, but he felt very uncomfortable in his heart after he said this. He got up and walked to the door. After he opened it, he walked out and closed the door. He left the space for the young man from the O family. If the young man from the O family committed suicide because of this, it would have nothing to do with Chumu. After all, it was impossible for Chumu to pay attention to him all the time. He could only bear everything by himself, straighten it out, and then become strong. As the door was closed, The sobbing sound gradually became softer and disappeared. Chu Mu strolled along the corridor on the third floor of the inn. He was walking aimlessly. Even he did not know why he was doing this. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 416. The full name of the young man from the O clan was O Chungluo. He was 15 years old this year, and his cultivation base was at the 8th level of the Sword Chi realm. With such a cultivation base, he was definitely a cultivation genius that was hard to come by in 100 years in the Green Edge Sword sect. In a place like the demon-shaking city, he could also be considered a rare cultivation genius. Being able to cultivate didn't mean being able to fight. They were two different concepts. Often, those who cultivated quickly would die in the hands of those who cultivated slowly because they weren't good at fighting. Or it could be said that they lacked rich experience in life and death battles. O Chungluo had been living in the O clan since he was young. He was protected by the clan. Normally, he would cultivate and practice his forging skills. He didn't have any combat experience at all. After the O clan was exterminated, he was brought away by Old Master O to escape from the desolate border city. They experienced many dangers, but those dangers were beyond O Chungluo's tolerance. O Chungluo deeply felt how weak he was. If he was strong enough, then the O clan wouldn't have been exterminated. His grandfather wouldn't have been severely injured and died from the pursuit. None of the tragedies would have happened. Strength. Everything was related to strength. His grandfather's death was a huge blow to O Chungluo. However, the years of escaping had forged his tenacious will and temperament. He also deeply understood that only by living well and continuing the O clan's bloodline would he be able to repay his grandfather. Therefore, after a day, O Chungluo broke away from his sorrow. At least on the surface, he seemed to have broken away from his sorrow. However, Chu Mu could see that in his eyes there was a trace of deep sorrow that was engraved in his heart. Chu Mu took out some spirit stones and cremated Old Master O's body in the demon-shaking city's funeral hall. O Chungluo put the ashes into an urn and wrapped the urn with a piece of cloth. In a place like the demon-shaking city, death could be seen everywhere. Some people died without a burial place, and some people couldn't find a place to bury their dead even if they wanted to. Burials were not allowed in the city, and burials outside the city could be destroyed, causing the deceased to not be able to rest in peace. As a result, the funeral parlors were born, and their business was quite good. After O Chungluo put away the urn, he stood in front of Chu Mu and stared at him. Suddenly, he knelt down and kowtowed to Chu Mu. Big brother Chu, thank you, thank you. It's nothing, Chu Mu said indifferently. Big brother Chu, I want to be strong as you. O Chungluo was still kneeling, but he straightened his back. His eyes were bloodshot, carrying traces of hatred and killing intent. He was like a desperate wolf, choosing to devour its prey. That kind of ruthlessness that came from the depths of his heart made people shudder. Big brother Chu, take me as your disciple. I want to become even stronger. O Chungluo didn't wait for Chu Mu's reply and directly kowtowed 3 times. The skin on his forehead split open and was covered with blood. I can give you pointers on cultivation and swordsmanship, but I won't take you as my disciple. Chu Mu was surprised by the hatred in O Chungluo's eyes, but he said calmly, You only have hatred in your heart now. This will be very helpful for your cultivation in the early stages. But if you keep using hatred in your heart to cultivate, you will lose yourself in the future. O Chungluo seemed to be listening to Chu Mu's words seriously, but his expression didn't change. He still couldn't understand the meaning of Chu Mu's words. In short, I won't take you as my disciple, but I can give you pointers on your cultivation, and I can also arrange a place for you to go. Chu Mu continued, I promised your grandfather that I would arrange a stable second half for you so that you could settle down and live your life. Now it seems that you have made your own choice. I won't forcefully interfere with your decision, as long as you remember one thing. No matter what decision you make, the final outcome should be borne by you, because that is your choice, your path. For the first time, Chumu said so much because he took that piece of paper and agreed to Old Master O's conditions. Otherwise, he couldn't be bothered to care about what O Chenluo would become. As for taking him as a disciple, Chumu didn't have any thoughts about it at all. Thinking about it, his current strength might be very strong, but that was only targeted. He was still not strong enough to face a sword grandmaster, so his path was still very long, and he hadn't developed to a limit yet. He himself needed to make more progress, so how could he take him as a disciple? As for giving pointers on cultivation and swordsmanship, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't the first time Chu Mu had done such things. Chu Mu's promise to give him pointers made O Chenluo very excited, and he quickly immersed himself in cultivation. He seemed to want to use endless cultivation to numb the pain in his heart, and use the endless hatred to stimulate the desire to cultivate. That kind of drive made Chu Mu very shocked, and persuasion had no effect. The effect was very obvious. 3 days later, O Chenluo's sword chi cultivation broke through to the 9th stage of sword chi, and his swordsmanship also improved a lot under Chu Mu's guidance. Similarly, Chu Mu's heavenly desolate sword physique was also completed. 10 ancient heavenly desolate pills were consumed, and there were only 5 left. In the guest room, Chu Mu's moon-white robe was shattered due to the tyrannical strength of his muscles. Chu Mu stood naked in the guest room, and every inch of his skin had turned yellowish-brown, covered with black cracks that spread all over his body. No, if one looked carefully, they would discover that the yellowish-brown color was the color of the muscles under the skin, and those black cracks were also the cracks of the muscles under the skin. However, they appeared through the skin, as if they were directly born on the skin. A strange aura was emitted from the muscles under Chu Mu's skin, and it pervaded the surroundings, causing the air to be filled with a strange smell. This kind of aura was indescribable, and it was very strange. Fortunately, there was only Chu Mu in the guest room at this time. O Chenluo was in another guest room, and he was also cultivating at this time. After a full 10 breaths, the black cracks on the skin disappeared in the blink of an eye. The yellowish-brown luster also quickly receded, and the skin once again returned to its original color. From the looks of it, Chu Mu's body didn't change much compared to before. Only some slight changes made his body look more charming, and it was filled with an incomparably powerful explosive force. Once that explosive force was released, it would be like a 100-year-old volcano, incomparably terrifying. Chu Mu raised both of his hands, opened his palms in front of his eyes, and carefully examined them. There was some joy in his eyes. He could clearly feel the strength of his body, and the incomparably terrifying power flowing in his body was at least 10 times stronger than before. 10 times the strength. He clenched his fist, and in an instant, a sharp sound of air exploding rang out, as if a huge firecracker had suddenly exploded. A strong air current rushed out from the left and right sides of his fist, making a whistling sound. He punched out, using 60% of his strength. The terrifying sound of air exploding suddenly rang out, and it was so sharp that it almost pierced the eardrums. One could only vaguely see a vague shadow of a fist and a transparent cone that seemed to have pierced through the air, piercing forward. Punching and kicking, Chu Mu turned into a phantom and moved around the spacious guest room. His speed was unbelievably fast, and wherever he passed, a burst of strong air currents formed into a whistling wind, blowing the curtains in the guest room, and the fragments of the white robe on the ground also danced with the wind, like graceful butterflies. Chu Mu seemed to have turned into a small tornado, and with a terrifying destructive force, it swept through the entire guest room. After a full quarter of an hour, Chu Mu finally stopped. He was not out of breath, his heartbeat was not accelerating, and there was not a single drop of sweat on his body. On the contrary, the muscles all over his body were slightly jumping because of the movement just now, as if they had a unique life force, which was very astonishing. The Sky Wasteland sword body is indeed a tyrannical sword body comparable to the top Xiantian sword body. The Viscera chapter, Blood chapter, Bones chapter, Meridians chapter, and Muscle chapter, and the Blood chapter have not been completely completed, but now my body has become very strong from the inside out. Chu Mu secretly said, the 7 chapters of the Sky Wasteland sword body. Each chapter was a kind of strengthening of the body. From the internal organs to the outermost hair, Chu Mu had strengthened the muscles. It could be said that Chu Mu had already cultivated the Sky Wasteland sword body to the level of Desheng. Next, as long as he finished cultivating the skin and hair, the Sky Wasteland sword body would be cultivated to perfection. Chu Mu did not know if there would be any other changes after cultivating the 6th and 7th chapters, besides being able to cultivate the Sky Wasteland sword chi, but at least until now he had finished cultivating the muscle chapter, and his body had become 10 times stronger than before. 10 times, maybe the concept was not clear, but for Chu Mu's overall strength, it was a very obvious increase. It could at least increase his strength by 2 times. Chu Mu was 100% sure that he could win. Currently, he did not need to use any of his sword aura, mental state, or sword force. He only needed to rely on his body and his sword techniques to fight against a normal initial Qi high-stage sword artist. This was not arrogance, but a confidence that came from his own strength. Taking out a low-grade spirit stone, Chu Mu stretched out a finger and caught the low-grade spirit stone. In an instant, his finger vibrated at a high frequency and pressed on the low-grade spirit stone. A strange sound was heard, and the low-grade spirit stone, which was as hard as a low-grade sword, was shattered into pieces in the blink of an eye. It turned into dust and splashed everywhere, bringing with it a strand of pure spirit chi. The skin on Chu Mu's finger also exploded, but there was not a single drop of blood. The flesh under the skin had a yellowish-brown luster. It flashed by like an illusion, and the skin was recovering at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. With the completion of the muscle chapter, his body had become 10 times stronger. The stone-trembling power that had just reached the level of Desheng's had increased again. It was approaching the level of Desheng's peak, and its power had become even more terrifying. One finger was able to shatter a low-grade spirit stone. In other words, Chu Mu's finger could shatter a low-grade armor. Just thinking about such a power was enough to make one's blood run cold and their hair stand on end. After trying it out, Chu Mu knew how strong his body was. He stopped testing and took out a new set of clothes to wear. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 417. A bull-sized wind-winged dragon lay in front of Chu Mu in the guest room with its wings folded. 3 days had passed. The beast seal pearl had imprinted Chu Mu's blood essence into the wind-winged dragon's body. In the end, a blood-red flame mark was formed on the wind-winged dragon's forehead. A powerful demonic aura was constantly emitted from the wind-winged dragon's body. Fortunately, Chu Mu had spread out his sword aura to prevent the wind-winged dragon's demonic aura from leaking out. Otherwise, it would probably cause unnecessary chaos. An adult wind-winged dragon would become a mid-level super-rank demonic beast. Due to its innate talent, it was much stronger than ordinary mid-level super-rank demonic beasts. Right now, this wind-winged dragon could only be considered to be in the growth stage. It was far from being mature. However, it already had the strength of a mid-level demonic beast. Its flying speed was 50% faster than ordinary mid-level demonic beasts. There was only one way to make the wind-winged dragon grow faster, and that was to consume demonic cores. A large number of demonic cores. The higher the level, the better. This was because the higher the level of the demonic core, the purer and more abundant the demonic energy it contained. It was also more beneficial for the demonic beast's growth. This time, Chu-Mu let the Wind-Winged Dragon out to feed it demonic cores. In the Chaos Demon Plains and Chaos Demon Mountain, Chu-Mu had killed many demonic beasts. Most of them were mid-level demonic beasts. He had obtained more than 100 mid-level demonic cores. Taking out a low-level, mid-level demonic core, the Wind-Winged Dragon's eyes lit up. It opened its mouth and swallowed the demonic core. Then it opened its mouth again. After repeating this 10 times, the Wind-Winged Dragon finally closed its mouth and eyes. It looked like it was sleeping. However, a powerful demonic energy was erupting from its body. Chu-Mu looked at it and put it back into the beast seal pearl. Then, Chu-Mu went to check on Qingluo's cultivation progress. With the support of hatred, Qingluo's sword qi cultivation speed was several times faster than ordinary people. However, he had just broken through to the 9th stage of sword qi not long ago, so it was impossible for him to break through to the 10th stage so quickly. On the other hand, although his swordsmanship had not killed anyone, it carried a trace of fierce killing intent, which was very shocking. It was obvious that if Qingluo continued to cultivate with this mentality, he would become a terrifying god of death. Similarly, he would also destroy himself in the end. However, all of this had nothing to do with Chu-Mu. He had already said what he needed to say. Whether or not Qingluo could comprehend it all depended on himself. After completing the 5th chapter, the muscle chapter, Chu-Mu began to practice the 6th chapter, the skin chapter. He had to master the Sky Baron's sword body as soon as possible. Only then would he be able to cultivate the Sky Baron's sword scripture and master the Sky Baron's sword qi, which would increase his strength further. At that time, Chu-Mu was sure that he had the qualifications to challenge the sword hero and would definitely be able to obtain this title. The next day, as usual, he released the Wind-Winged Demon Dragon to check on the situation. Chu-Mu immediately realized that the Wind-Winged Demon Dragon had already digested all 10 demon cores, and its aura had also become stronger. The demon cores of different demonic beasts contain different amounts of demonic energy. This was because when a demonic beast consumed a demon core to strengthen itself, it had to refine the demonic energy within the demon core and remove the impurities within, leaving only the purest part of the demonic energy that was useful to itself. The pure demonic energy that each demon core could provide was not much, so if a demonic beast wanted to become stronger, it had to consume a lot of demon cores. Chu-Mu estimated that even if he gave all the demon cores he had to the Wind-Winged Demon Dragon to consume, it would still be difficult for the Wind-Winged Demon Dragon to reach the high middle stage. After all, low-level demon cores were useless to middle-stage demonic beasts. It was conceivable that once the Wind-Winged Demon Dragon reached the high middle stage, the number of demon cores it would need to advance to the super middle stage would increase exponentially. What a money grubber! Chu-Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. It was not easy to raise a flying mount like this. An ordinary swordsman would not be able to afford it even if they sold their entire family's fortune. Looks like I have to get more demon cores, preferably middle-stage ones. Chu-Mu frowned slightly and mumbled to himself. He then put the Wind-Winged Demon Beast back into the Beast Seal Pearl. There were 2 ways to obtain demon cores. First, enter the Chaos Demon Mountains on the Chaos Demon Plains to hunt down middle-stage demonic beasts to obtain demon cores. With Chu-Mu's current strength, it was not difficult to hunt down middle-stage demonic beasts. However, it would not be fast. Chu-Mu had spent more than a month to hunt down more than 100 middle-stage demonic beasts. Second, purchase demon cores with spiritual stones. He could buy them from swordsmen or shops. As long as he had enough spiritual stones, he would be able to obtain a large number of middle-stage demon cores in a short time. The premise was that he had a large number of spiritual stones. Because of the Wind-Winged Demon Dragon, Chu-Mu had almost used up all his spiritual stones. If it were not for the 20 low-silver spiritual stones cards he obtained from the Sword Pressure Wild Lion Gang, he would have become a pauper. He had to earn more spiritual stones. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. Chu Mu frowned slightly. He knew that it was a stranger who knocked on the door. His senses told him so. "Who is it?" Chu Mu asked. "Fu Taisheng from the Red Coat Association." A deep voice came through the closed door like rolling thunder. Chu Mu flicked out a wisp of sword aura, and the door bolt automatically opened. The door opened, and a large man wearing a red robe stood at the door. His body was tall and sturdy, and when he stepped into the room he was like a fierce tiger. Chu Mu felt as if the entire room was shaking. His aura, a powerful aura, enveloped the whole room. The curtains did not move at all. Even the dust in the air seemed to be still. This aura was extremely domineering. It contained a sword-like sharpness. It was as if it wanted to kill Chu Mu on the spot. The table in front of Chu Mu creaked, as if it was about to shatter. However, Chu Mu did not move. Even the chair he was sitting on did not move. It was as if this pressure did not exist. His eyelids trembled slightly. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with cold lightning. A dark golden light shot out from his pupils. It pierced through the air and went straight for the opponent. In an instant, the heavy and domineering aura seemed to have been torn apart by the incomparably sharp sword aura. The red-clothed Fu Tiesheng's pupils contracted rapidly. He only felt that the dark golden aura was like a sharp sword piercing into his eyes, causing a piercing pain. He couldn't help but close his eyes. Fu Tiesheng's expression changed. His domineering aura suddenly disappeared, and the air in the room returned to normal. "Strong, very strong!" Fu Taisheng shouted in his mind. The slight underestimation he had of Chu Mu disappeared. Chu Mu's eyes were filled with light. Fu Tiesheng's sword chi was at the peak of Desheng's chi high level. It was quite strong, but if Chu Mu wanted to kill him, it would be easy. Fu Taisheng also saw that Chu Mu's sword chi was at the low chi high level. He was shocked and could not hide it. He looked like he was only in his 20s, but he had already reached the low chi high level. His gaze made Fu Taisheng tremble. What kind of power could cultivate such a powerful young warrior? The Demon Shaker City had its own rules. Outside forces were not allowed to interfere. Otherwise, all the forces in the city would fight back. There were many powerful warriors in the city, and they were very powerful. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, the forces in the city did not want to provoke the powerful forces outside of the city. They did not want to cause unnecessary conflicts. "I am here to negotiate." Fu Taisheng walked to the table and pulled out a chair to sit down. He looked at Chu Mu and said in a deep voice. His goal was to find Chu Mu and solve the problem between him and Chu Mu. As for how to solve the problem, he would adjust it according to Chu Mu's strength. If Chu Mu showed signs of difficulty under his aura, Fu Taisheng would take the initiative and use his domineering attitude to force Chu Mu to submit. Unfortunately, Chu Mu was not only able to withstand his aura, but even his gaze was terrifying. Fu Taisheng had to change his original plan and use another one. "I know the O family's grandfather and grandson are in your hands. As long as you hand them over to the Red Coat Association, all the problems between us will be solved. We will also give you appropriate compensation." Fu Taisheng said slowly. His tone was neither servile nor overbearing as he looked at Chu Mu. "They are dead." Chu Mu replied, "Dead." Fu Taisheng did not react for a moment. His face was full of shock. After 3 breaths, he finally reacted and said, "Then I would like to ask you to hand over their bodies to me, including everything they have on them." Chu Mu did not reply. He knew very well what the other party wanted. It was the piece of paper that recorded the heaven-shaking sword forging technique. Unfortunately, this piece of paper was already in Chu Mu's hands. There was no way he could take it out. The dead should be respected. Chu Mu replied. The veins on Fu Tiesheng's forehead throbbed. He stared coldly at Chu Mu. His mind was spinning rapidly. He suddenly said, "Is that thing in your hands?" You don't have to answer. Without waiting for Chumu to say anything, Fu Taixing continued. Since that thing is in your hands, I hope you can hand it over to us. I think that thing is not very useful to you. We can give you enough compensation. 1 million mid-grade spirit stones. Fu Taixing said the last 4 words forcefully. 1 million mid-grade spirit stones. This was equivalent to 10 million low-grade spirit stones. Of course, in terms of practicality, it was better than 10 million low-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu's expression didn't change, but he was still surprised. This Red Coat Association truly wasn't small. The moment they opened their mouth, they offered 1 million middle-rank spirit stones. They were indeed rather sincere. Unfortunately, to Chu Mu, that piece of paper was the reward he promised Old Master O. He did not even study it himself. How could he trade it to the Red Coats Association? 1 million mid-grade spirit stones is indeed tempting, but I don't know what you are talking about. Chu Mu replied calmly. His tone was very firm. Since you are not willing to trade, you should be careful. Hiding in Windward Inn is the safest. Otherwise, once you leave the inn, it will be very chaotic outside. You may even lose your life if you are not careful. Fu Taixing stood up decisively, leaving behind a threatening sentence. He turned and walked out of the room. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 418. The negotiation failed. Fu Taixing left the Windward Inn and returned to the Red Dress Association. He immediately reported the result to the Red Dress Association's leader. He is very strong. I am not confident that I can defeat him. I believe that he has the strength to defeat a perfect Qi High Realm sword artist. So once he leaves the city, it will be very difficult to catch him. If that is the case, then kill him in the city. The Red Dress Association's leader said slowly after a few breaths of silence, Send someone to keep an eye on the Windward Inn. Once he leaves the Windward Inn, ask Sunsets for help. Sunsets. Fu Taixing's voice trembled as his pupils contracted. Sky-slaughtering sword, Sunset's sword, blood-burning sword, and ghost mist sword. These were the 4 people that must not be provoked in the Demon Shaker City because they were lone wolves. They did not belong to any organization and were extremely powerful. Once they were provoked, even if they did not die immediately, they would continue to attack until they died. Even a force as powerful as the Red Coat Association would not be willing to provoke such an existence. If they could not kill it, they would have to face their revenge. Constantly being on guard against such a powerful enemy was an incomparable headache. They also never made friends with others. Perhaps they thought that others did not have the qualifications to do so. In short, they were a group of people who were difficult to deal with. Someone once offered a high price to hire them, but was immediately rejected. These 4 people had their own principles and were not influenced by others. Therefore, when Fu Taixing heard that Sunsets was asked to help, he could not hide his shock. He knew that the Red Dress Association would have a follow-up plan to deal with Chu Mu. He did not expect that they would ask Sunsets for help. Hearing the leader's words, it seemed that Sunsets had agreed to help. This was quite unbelievable. The Red Dress Association must have given him something that he needed. Otherwise, he would not have agreed to help. Good. With Sunsets, this person will die without a doubt. When the time comes, everything he has will be ours. Fu Taixing clenched his fist and said coldly. A sinister smile hung on his lips. If one wanted to kill someone in the Demon Shaker City, they were not allowed to use their sword chi. The best way to kill someone was to use their sword arts. Using a high level of attainment in sword arts together with the power of concept would result in a terrifying lethality. Among the 4 of them, Sunset's swordsmanship was publicly acknowledged to be the second best. As for the number 1, it was Ghostly Mist Sword. Even Void Slaughterer and Bloodblade Foulness acknowledged this. However, Ghostly Mist Sword's whereabouts were unpredictable. No one even knew what he looked like. There were even rumors that broken sword sunset swordsmanship was the second best in Shifter City. No one refuted this claim. The threat Fu Taixing left before he left didn't scare Chu-Mu. After closing the door, Chu-Mu took out the piece of paper from his space bracelet. This piece of paper was very thin, about the length and width of a palm. It was almost translucent, like a piece of oiled paper. Densely packed ancient black characters were written on it. The ancient black characters were very strange. They didn't seem to have any pattern to them. They overlapped and overlapped with each other. At first glance, it was very difficult to distinguish them. In fact, the closer one looked at them, the messier the characters became. This time, Chu-Mu had the time to properly study the paper. Calming his heart, he focused all of his attention on this piece of paper. In the first breath, Chu-Mu felt dazzled. In the third breath, Chu-Mu felt dizzy. His body swayed as if he was about to collapse. In the fifth breath, Chu-Mu felt as if his stomach was overturning. However, Chu-Mu's tenacious willpower and nerves allowed him to forcefully hold on. In the 10th breath, Chu-Mu felt his vision turn blurry. The ancient black characters on the paper seemed to come alive, transforming into tadpoles. They flew out of the paper and swam in front of Chu-Mu as if they were wandering in a river. Every tadpole carried an indescribable might as they continuously battered Chu-Mu's mind and willpower. It was as if a hammer was violently hammering him. Ordinary swordsmen wouldn't be able to endure this kind of hammering. Every hammering would shatter their mind and willpower. It was a pain that penetrated deep into their soul. However, Chu-Mu's soul was 10 times stronger than an ordinary swordsman's. His mind and willpower had also become incomparably resilient due to his repeated training. Under the repeated assault of these tadpoles, Chu-Mu was able to endure. After enduring, Chu-Mu discovered the benefits. The ancient black characters battered and hammered again and again. It was as if a hammer was hammering a red-hot soldering iron. The impurities within the soldering iron were expelled bit by bit, making the soldering iron purer, tougher, and harder. It was as if a piece of soldering iron had been forged into a sword embryo. Chu-Mu could feel his mind and willpower strengthening at an imperceptible rate, little by little. No matter what he obtained in the end, just the tempering of his mind and willpower was a great harvest. Mind and willpower originated from the soul. The soul was the foundation. The stronger one became, the stronger one's mind and willpower would be. However, this was only one of the fundamental methods. There were other methods to strengthen one's mind and willpower. For example, pain. After enduring inhuman pain again and again, one's mind and willpower would grow. Another example was a high-intensity battle. Fighting for a short period of time was easy, but fighting for a long period of time not only tested one's physical endurance, but also their mind and willpower. Otherwise, they would collapse. In short, there were many ways to strengthen one's mind and willpower, but none of them were easy to bear. Chu-Mu now felt that his mind and willpower were like a red-hot soldering iron, being hammered again and again. Every hammering seemed to remove a trace of impurities from the soldering iron, causing the soldering iron to constantly change. In fact, Chu-Mu's soul force was strong enough, but most of it had not been developed. What he displayed now was only a small part of it. His mind and willpower could not be fully displayed. Therefore, the ancient characters on the paper hammered Chu-Mu's mind and willpower again and again. It was also a process of developing his soul, although it was very, very slow. Every time the ancient characters battered Chu-Mu's mind and willpower, they would shatter and turn into strands of energy that entered Chu-Mu's soul, turning into characters one after another. Chu-Mu forgot the passage of time. He was completely immersed in it, as if thousands of years had passed. When he came back to his senses, he felt that the paper in front of him had returned to its original state. No matter how hard he tried, it was still covered in ancient black characters. However, no matter how focused he he would not feel dizzy or nauseous. Then Chumu felt as if something had appeared in his mind, some information. He quickly put the paper into his space bracelet and checked the changes in his body. He felt that his mind, energy, and spirit were full, unprecedentedly full. His mind and willpower had been strengthened by a lot, and the effect was even more obvious than when he used the blood evil stone. As for how much it had increased, Chumu could not be sure, because mind and willpower were intangible and difficult to measure. In any case, the strengthening of his mind and willpower was greatly beneficial to him. He suddenly remembered that he still had a high-grade blood evil stone. He hadn't used it before because he didn't have enough endurance. Now he should be able to use it. Chumu did not immediately take out the high-grade blood evil stone. Instead, he checked the information that had appeared in his mind. Read. The amount of information in his mind was not large, but it was not easy to understand. Even with Chumu's monstrous comprehension, it took him half an hour to finish reading it, and he only understood 1/5 of it. Chumu continued to read it again, patiently. He read it 10 times in a row, comprehending it word by word, and then integrated it to understand it. Finally, he understood that section of information. That section of information recorded the sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword. This was not out of Chumu's expectations. What really shocked and surprised Chumu was that he could practice the sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword. Perhaps this was not accurate, because as long as one could obtain the cultivation method of this great sword forging technique, anyone could cultivate it. However, a swordsman's main goal was to cultivate the sword. If one were to divide their attention to cultivate the great sword forging technique, they would only waste their time and energy. In the end, they might achieve nothing. After all, a person's energy was limited. If one wanted to achieve outstanding achievements in one area, they had to invest more time and energy and could not be distracted. Walking the path of a swordsman or walking the path of a swordsman, one had to make a choice. Just like the Oak clan, they had to make such a choice, which led to the Oak clan's eventual destruction, because they did not have enough strength to deter others. Originally, Chumu only wanted to see the secret of this paper out of curiosity, and he also expected to obtain the sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword. However, he had his own ideas, and even if he obtained the sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword, he would not practice it. Now, Chumu changed his mind. The sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword. The reason why it can surpass other sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword is because its secret lies in the power of vibration and the energy fusing. Chumu's eyes flickered with light. I have mastered the power of vibration, and it just so happens that this sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword can assist me in practicing the stone trembling energy. Combining the sky-shaking energy fusing with the sword and contributing to the improvement of one's strength, this was the best way, and it was also the way that Chumu was most satisfied with. However, there was still focus. Chumu would focus on practicing the sword, and the sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword would be an auxiliary. First, his spirit had been hammered by the ancient characters on the paper, and his soul had been tempered, developing more, and his spirit had become stronger. Now, Chumu had obtained a sky-shaking energy fusing to forge a sword that could assist him in practicing the stone trembling energy, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Thinking of this, Chumu almost could not help but let out a long howl, if not for the fact that he was in the tavern. After 10 breaths, Chumu calmed down and took out the only high-grade blood evil stone to temper his will. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 419. Inside the guest room, Chumu only had a tiny bit of the dark red stone left on his forehead. It shattered and turned into dust and dissipated. With the disappearance of the high-grade blood evil stone, Chumu woke up. When he was in the Chi transformation realm, The blood evil chi of the high-grade blood evil stone was hard for Chu Mu to bear. Forcefully training his will would only cause harm to himself. So Chu Mu had kept it. Later on, as more and more things happened, he gradually forgot about it. Even after breaking through to the Chi High realm, he did not recall it. Until now, after receiving the imprint of the Skyquake Energy Fusion sword forging art, his spirit and had been strengthened in the process. Only then did Chu Mu remember that he still had a high-grade blood evil stone. The high-quality blood fiend stone's blood fiend aura was extremely powerful. Chu Mu used an entire day to completely consume the blood fiend aura. His mind and willpower had also become even more condensed and resilient after resisting the blood fiend aura. The strengthening of his spirit and had not only increased his understanding of sword force, but also increased his control of sword chi. Imperceptibly, Chu Mu's overall strength had increased a little. He stood up and walked out of the room to Oh Chung Luo's guest room. Oh Chung Luo was still practicing his sword arts. Fortunately, the guest room was big enough. In addition, he did not need to pour in sword chi to practice his sword arts. Thus, Oh Chung Luo did not cause any damage to the things in the room. His sword arts had become more skillful. It was hard to imagine that other than the time he spent cultivating his sword chi, Oh Chung Luo spent the rest of his time practicing his sword arts. Even sleeping and eating only took up a small portion of his time. He was like a crazy demon. Every time Chu Mu saw him, he would be able to see his bloodshot eyes filled with deep exhaustion. Oh Chung Luo finished practicing his sword arts once again. He looked at Chu Mu with his bloodshot eyes, waiting for Chu Mu's evaluation. You have improved, but it is not enough. Chu Mu said briefly, you need to rest now. Practice after you have enough rest. The effect will be better. However, Oh Chung Luo acted as if he didn't hear it. He swung his sword again and continued to cultivate. Chu Mu frowned slightly. His hand moved like lightning, striking Oh Chung Luo's neck. Oh Chung Luo's body trembled and he fainted. Chu Mu gently lifted Oh Chung Luo up and placed him on the bed. Since Oh Chung Luo wasn't willing to rest, Chu Mu could only use this method to let him rest. Combining work and rest was the best way to cultivate. Blindly cultivating like Oh Chung Luo was overdrawing his life and potential. Not only was it difficult to truly improve, it was also like a slow suicide. After closing the door, Chu Mu instructed the waiter to deliver food to Oh Chung Luo on time. He then walked down the stairs, intending to make a trip to the Yongji restaurant. He now had 20 low-grade silver spirit stone cards. He planned to use most of them to buy mid-grade demon cores to train the Wind-Winged Dragon. The business on the first floor of the inn was as brisk as ever. Almost every table was filled with people who were gulping down wine and eating meat. To these swordsmen, who had their heads hanging from their belts all year round, elegance and refinement had nothing to do with them. Could such things be eaten as food? Could it be used to increase their strength? When Chu Mu walked out of the inn's entrance, he caught sight of 2 red silhouettes from the corner of his eye, disappearing in a flash. Chu Mu's lips curled into a smile. He knew that the members of the Red Dress Association had been waiting for him to appear. Now that he had appeared, they must have gone to report the news. When the time came, someone would come to deal with him. He strode towards the direction of the Yongji restaurant. At the same time, the members of the Red Dress Association who were in charge of monitoring, Chu Mu hurriedly returned to the Red Dress Association and reported the news of Chu Mu's departure from the inn. Of course, there were also people who kept an eye on Chu Mu, paying attention to Chu Mu's every move. The operation began immediately. A group of members of the Red Dress Association immediately set off. In addition, there were also people who went to inform Savage Sword Sunsets. After a period of time, Chu Mu walked out of the Yongji restaurant. He had spent 10 low silver spirit stone cards and bought a total of 20 high mid-tier demon cores. On average, each high mid-tier demon core cost 50,000 low-grade spirit stones. The value of a mid-level, high-rank demonic beast was definitely more than 5 million low-rank spirit stones. But a mid-level, high-rank demonic beast core was only worth 50,000 low-rank spirit stones, which was at least 100 times more than the value of the core. Living demon beasts had immeasurable value, but dead demon beasts could only be used as food and materials. Their demon cores were not very useful to human swordsmen. This was because swordsmen were unable to absorb the demonic energy within the demon cores. Otherwise, it would lead to a conflict of energy. In light cases, their meridians would be severed, and in heavy cases, their bodies would explode and they would die. Demon cores were only useful to demon beasts. Perhaps they had other uses as well, but generally speaking, they were not very useful. Therefore, the value of demon cores was not very high. Actually, it was not very accurate to say that it was not very high. Think about it, a high mid-tier demon core was worth 50,000 low-grade spirit stones. 1, 2, or 3 might not be much, but what about 100? That was the value of 5 million low-grade spirit stones. Killing 100 high mid-tier demon beasts was not an easy task. It could be life-threatening at any time. On the other hand, it was even more difficult to cultivate a high mid-tier demon beast. It required a lot of mid-tier demon cores. Chu-Mu estimated that these 20 mid-tier demon cores, in addition to the ones he already had, could only help the wind-winged dragon reach high mid-tier. In order to reach the mid-mid-tier, the number of demon cores needed would be doubled. On top of that, he would also need some mid-mid-tier demon cores. Other than buying demon cores, Chu-Mu also sold all the low-grade demon cores he had obtained. The value was not high. Each core was less than 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. In the end, he only sold them for a little over 300,000 low-grade spirit stones. Not long after he left the Yangji restaurant, Chu-Mu felt a different aura in the air. It was a kind of aura that made people feel pressured. It was as if a storm was coming. From afar, Chu-Mu thought he saw a blood-red light rising from the ground into the sky. It was like a sharp sword that was going to pierce through the sky. The sharpness and murderous aura were like the Milky Way pouring down and shattering the clouds. It was extremely frightening. Chu-Mu stopped in his tracks. In front of him, a section of the street was empty. Everyone had retreated to the left and right sides. Even the shops were closed, leaving only a small gap. There were eyes watching the situation outside through the gap. Chu-Mu's gaze spread across the empty street and landed on a figure standing upright. His back was like a sword, pointing to the sky. He was so fierce that he could destroy everything. Half of this person's face was covered by long black hair. Through the hair, one could see his extremely cold eyes. The other eye that was not covered was also shining with a cold light, as if it could freeze a person's soul. A sword hilt was exposed on his shoulder. He was wearing a silver robe. The right sleeve was empty. He only had one left arm, but no one dared to look down on him. Just the aura on his body was enough to shock many swordsmen. No one dared to come within 10 meters of him. Otherwise, they would collapse under that terrifying aura. This was a terrifying aura that had been forged through countless killings. Chu-Mu's gaze landed on the one-armed, silver-robed man. When his eyes made contact with that pair of eyes that were so cold that it could almost freeze a person's soul, his soul trembled. He only felt a chill coming from the depths of his soul. His spine could not help but surge with a cold current that swept through his entire body. What a terrifying gaze! Even Chu-Mu's willpower was shaken by it. However, it was only shaken. If he wanted to use such a gaze to intimidate Chu-Mu, it was simply a fantasy. Compared to the other party, Chu-Mu's gaze was very calm. It was so clear that one could see the bottom of an ancient well. It did not seem to have any power, but his eyes were incomparably deep and dark. When the other party's soul-freezing chill and sharpness pierced into his eyes, it was as if they had been absorbed and disappeared without a trace. The confrontation of gazes and the confrontation of aura was evenly matched. All around, the swordsmen who were watching from afar held their breaths and clenched their fists. They did not dare to move at all. Their faces were flushed with excitement. The one-armed silver-robed man's attire and gaze allowed Chumu to recognize his identity. Savage Sword-Setting Sun. According to Han Yi, Savage Sword-Setting Sun only had one left arm and liked to wear silver robes. Because he only had one left arm, and because he liked to cut off his opponent's right arm first during battle, he got the name Savage Sword. Countless people and demonic beasts had died under the blade of the broken sword. This kind of slaughter had created a terrifying, murderous aura around him, and it had also created a gaze that could freeze souls. Normal swordsmen would tremble from the bottom of their hearts if they met his gaze. How could they fight Savage Sword? If they did not even dare to look him in the eye, how could they fight Savage Sword? A few dozen meters behind Savage Sword-Setting Sun, a group of swordsmen in red robes had gathered. They were the members of the Red Shirt Association, and their leader was Fu Taixing. They only had one mission, and that was to bring Chumu's corpse back to the Red Shirt Association after Savage Sword killed Chumu. Everything on Chumu's body would belong to the Red Shirt Association. For this, they paid a huge price to hire Savage Sword. They did not even hesitate to offend Savage Sword Void Slaughterer. Now, it was time for the broken sword to kill this person. This made them feel excited and tremble. They would watch as the broken sword cut off their opponent's right arm, then their right leg, and then their left leg. Their body parts would be reduced one by one under the broken sword until they died. This was a kind of torture, an inhuman torture. Since Chumu had heard of Savage Sword-Setting Sun's name from Han Yi, he knew his attire and naturally knew Savage Sword's preferences. However, this time, Savage Sword had found the wrong person. On the street, the air seemed to have frozen. There was not even a trace of wind. An oppressive aura spread out. The dark clouds in the sky seemed to have gathered from afar, forming a large black mass that seemed to be about to press down. It was like the oppressive atmosphere before a storm. Everyone felt as if they were lacking oxygen. They desperately tried to breathe, but they could not. This kind of oppressive atmosphere made their chests feel so tight that they almost vomited blood. At this moment, Chumu moved. He did not move as quickly as the wind, nor did he explode like lightning. He only took a step forward as usual. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 420. No one knew where it came from, but a gust of wind blew over. It was like a breeze brushing past one's ears, causing one's mind to shake. The oppressive feeling that was like dark clouds pressing down on the earth was instantly alleviated by quite a bit. However, no one dared to breathe. They were desperately suppressing it because their gazes were all on Chumu. Taking step after step, he took another step. It looked no different from a normal walk, but it gave the surrounding swordsmen a feeling that Chumu's every step was stepping on their hearts, causing them to feel immense pressure. Even their heartbeats were being suppressed time and time again, making them feel so uncomfortable that they almost spat out blood. At this moment, Setting Sun also took a step forward. His steps were different from Chumu's. They were filled with killing intent, as if every step would take a life. A second gust of wind blew from Setting Sun's direction towards Chumu. The two gusts of wind collided midway, and a muffled explosion sounded out. Small cyclones frantically swept across the area, filling the air with dust. Chumu and Setting Sun were only 30 meters apart, and this distance was rapidly shrinking. The surrounding swordsmen suddenly discovered that Chumu and Xieyang's walking speed was increasing. Step by step, they slowly sped up. When the two were 20 meters apart, they went from walking to jogging. When they were 10 meters apart, they went from jogging to sprinting. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Two gusts of wind rang out. A white figure and a silver figure were rapidly approaching each other. In the next moment, everyone's vision blurred. They could vaguely see two blurry, sword light streaking across the sky, as if slashing towards them. A chilling sensation swept through their bodies, causing them to feel waves of pain as if they were being sliced apart. They couldn't help but tremble. In just one breath, Chu-Mu and Setting Sun had unleashed their swords. The profound star sword was like a falling star, while the waning sun sword was like the setting sun. The two swords changed positions dozens of times in an instant, each aiming for the opponent's vitals. Chu-Mu and Shui-Yong dodged, parried, and changed positions. In the span of a breath, Shui-Yong and Shui-Yong had done things that ordinary swordsmen could only dream of. Finally, an incomparably ear-piercing clang resounded, lingering between heaven and earth. The profound star sword and the cruel sun sword inevitably collided. Everyone seemed to see a circle of metallic ripples slowly spreading out from the collision point of the two blurry sword light, like a wave crashing into the surrounding air. The powerful collision sent both Chu-Mu and Setting Sun flying back 3 meters. They pointed their swords at each other from afar, their auras bursting out from their bodies and soaring into the sky. This was not the fluctuation of sword chi, but an aura that came purely from one's body and mind. It was a manifestation of one's essence, energy, and spirit. It was a unique aura produced by a swordsman after experiencing life and death situations. It was called sword pressure. Every swordsman possessed this aura, but there were differences in strength. The weak ones would only be able to cause a slight effect on ordinary people who had not cultivated, while the strong ones would be able to bring about a terrifying suppression on ordinary swordsmen, as if they were crushing ants. When the difference in strength was too great, just this aura alone was enough to cause the opponent to collapse or even die. Regardless of whether it was Chu-Mu or Setting Sun, their willpower was stronger than the average person's. They had also experienced more life and death situations than ordinary swordsmen, coupled with their extraordinary talents. All these factors combined to create an extraordinarily powerful aura. Their auras were like swords and sabers, sharp and unparalleled. When they collided, it was as if two swords were clashing. Faintly, people seemed to hear endless clanging sounds and seemed to see countless sparks flying in the air. The sound of metal clashing could be heard continuously, and the terrifying auras became more and more powerful. A circular aura formed around Chu-Mu and Setting Sun's bodies. The auras seemed to be of different colors. Chu-Mu's was dark gold, while Setting Sun's was silver. The dark gold and silver auras collided again and again. Within the auras, sharp blades slashed at each other, then reformed and slashed at each other again and again. Every slash contained an incomparably terrifying power, causing one's heart to tremble. Chu-Mu's expression was slightly excited, and his pupils were trembling. It was because of excitement. Very few people could cause him to be this excited. Setting Sun's eyes, which were so cold that they could freeze one's soul, trembled slightly. There was a flash of excitement that came from the depths of his soul. In the end, it seemed to have turned into ice, causing his gaze to become even colder. A powerful enemy. Both Chu-Mu and Setting Sun instantly defined each other in their hearts, regardless of the cultivation level of their opponent's sword aura. Just this aura alone was enough to explain everything. A powerful enemy. The wind stopped once again, and the air stopped flowing. The sound of the entire street was instantly silenced. Chu-Mu and Setting Sun could sense that the people around them had all disappeared. They could only see themselves and their opponent. In Setting Sun's eyes, dark gold flames rose from Chu-Mu's body, burning fiercely. In Chu-Mu's eyes, silver flames rose from Setting Sun's body, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. This kind of aura was not something an ordinary swordsman could see, other than the swordsmen around them. There were even more people watching from a distance. The sky-slaughtering sword, the blood-burning sword, and even the origin realm. Kill! Setting Sun's lips trembled as he softly spat out a word filled with killing intent. In the next moment, his sword moved. The setting sun sword reflected the afterglow of the setting sun. Crimson and silver intertwined as it pierced towards Chu Mu like a bolt of lightning. This sword did not have any sword aura fluctuations, but it contained the power of conception. Not only was it fast, it was also unbelievably powerful. Chu Mu waved his right hand, and the sinking star sword slashed out diagonally. The dark gold sword aura cut through the air, leaving behind a dark gold trail. A clash of sword techniques, a clash of conceptions. With a clang, the sinking star sword and the setting sun sword came into contact. In the blink of an eye, the two swords had clashed dozens of times, causing countless sparks to fly. The trajectory of each sword was clearly visible, and the trajectory of each sword was mysterious and unpredictable. The white and silver figures moved as well. They were like butterflies fluttering in the air, or eagles soaring in the sky. Their elegance and sharpness dazzled the onlookers. The sword in setting sun's left hand was sharp and crafty. Every sword strike was unexpected. Chu Mu's sword was majestic and majestic. A battle of sword techniques would not affect a large area. An area of 10 square meters was enough for two people to fight to their heart's content. This was a battle of life and death. Every sword strike was filled with danger. However, Chu Mu and Setting Sun's sword techniques were both extraordinary. When they clashed, waves of sword wind cut through the surroundings, shooting out over 10 meters away. They left cut marks on the hard ground of the street. The sword aura was comparable to the sword aura of the Qi transformation realm. It's also a mutated concept. Chu Mu and Setting Sun exclaimed in their hearts. They were both surprised and excited. Mutated concepts were rare. They never thought that they would meet someone who also possessed a mutated concept here. Chu Mu's mutated concept was the lacerating concept. Chu Mu guessed that Setting Sun's mutated concept was also a mutated concept of the metal concept. It was similar to his lacerating concept. It should be the lacerating concept. The lacerating concept was about 15% stronger than the metal concept. In other words, a 60% mastery of the lacerating concept would have 70% of the metal concept's power. This was a battle of sword techniques. Although the concept was used, due to the limitations of sword techniques, each strike could only carry a small portion of the concept's power. Therefore, Chu Mu did not know how much of Setting Sun's lacerating concept was, and Setting Sun did not know how much of Chu Mu's mutated concept was. Setting Sun only had one feeling. Chu Mu's concept was also a mutated concept of the metal concept. In terms of power, it was even stronger than his lacerating concept. However, he did not know what concept it was called because it was a mutated concept of the metal concept. Furthermore, it was infused with a portion of the wind concept's power. It was a completely new mutated concept that was unique to Chu Mu. Setting Sun's killing intent surged. He would not allow such a person to live. 1% of the sword aura was infused into the Setting Sun sword, causing the power of each strike to multiply. Every strike was accompanied by the sound of wind and thunder. The moment Setting Sun used 1% of his sword aura, Chu Mu also used 1% of his sword aura. The power of each strike was multiplied, and it could cut through heaven and earth. Suffocation. The spectating swordsmen felt like they were suffocating. The weaker ones were already foaming at the mouth under the terrifying pressure of the sword. Sword art's lacerating concept. 1% of the sword aura's power. Every strike made the spectators feel as if the air was being torn apart. The two silhouettes shuttled back and forth as the two swords clashed again and again. The two did not back away from each other. Instead, they both used their own abilities to negate the rebounding force and used it to launch another attack. Everyone's eyes were attracted to the battle. They could not shift their gazes away, and no one was even willing to blink. Every second of the battle was extremely exciting. Missing a second was like missing a great show. I can't wait to fight you. Void Butcher, who was far away, gripped the hilt of his sword and released his sword aura. His eyes were filled with cold lightning. I hope you won't die under Setting Sun's sword. Blood Sword Finlai's expression became even more excited. He licked his lips. He loved to taste the blood of powerful enemies. It was more delicious than wine, and it intoxicated him. The spectating Astral Realm warriors were also shocked. They were shocked by the power displayed by Chu Mu and Setting Sun's sword arts. They all understood that once people like them grew up, it would not be a problem for them to reach the Astral Realm. They could even be considered powerful among the Astral Realm warriors. Setting Sun's sword became sharper and sharper. The power of the broken sword was displayed without a doubt. Every strike was aimed at Chu Mu's right arm. Even though Chu Mu knew that his sword would attack the right arm first, it was impossible to guard against it. It was as if he could cut off the right arm from any angle. However, Chu Mu's sword arts were more profound than Setting Sun's. Every strike was able to block Setting Sun's attack and counterattack. 15 minutes, half an hour. It was a satisfying battle. This battle is over. Chu Mu said softly. His voice was heard by everyone, but none of them understood what he meant. Was Chu Mu surrendering, or was he still hiding his strength? Setting Sun once again slashed at Chu Mu's right arm from an unbelievable angle. Chu Mu countered with a backhand slash. Deshang's stone-trembling energy was activated. The two swords collided at an indescribable high speed, and the ruined sun sword was instantly knocked away, almost flying out of his hands. The profound star sword went straight in, a sword carrying the might of heaven slashing down on Shui Yang's shoulder. His protective sword Qi was directly torn apart, and his shoulder was split open by the sword. The surrounding flesh and bones also exploded under the impact of the rock-shaking power. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijin. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 421. A blood-curdling scream rang out from Setting Sun's mouth. Like a sound wave, it covered the entire street and entered everyone's ears. Those who heard it felt as if their scalps were about to explode. A chill ran down their spines, causing them to shiver uncontrollably. It was as if they had been hit in the back of their heads. Their eyes bulged so much that they were about to fall out. Their mouths were so wide open that a fist could fit inside. What did they just see? The infamous savage, sword Setting Sun's left shoulder was sliced off with a single slash. His left arm flew into the air and rolled on the ground a few times. Fresh blood splattered everywhere, and the stench of blood filled the air. Setting Sun's sword made an ear-piercing sound as it collided with the hard ground of the street. Chu Mu flicked his wrist, and the profound star sword turned from vertical to horizontal as it slashed toward Setting Sun's throat. With a ripping sound, as if cloth had been torn apart, crimson blood splattered into the air. Setting Sun's blood-curdling scream was abruptly cut off. Shui Yang's eyes were filled with fear, unwillingness, and disbelief. He stared at the sky as if he was questioning the heavens. His armless body slowly fell backwards, kicking up a cloud of dust with a loud bang. The falling body seemed to have smashed into everyone's hearts, causing their hearts to stop for an instant. Then they suddenly trembled, as if their hearts had jumped to their throats, unable to form any form of discomfort. The sound of the falling body was like an echo, echoing in their ears over and over again. This scene was like a brand that was branded into their hearts. It would be unforgettable even in death. Chu Mu casually brandished his sword, causing blood to splatter everywhere. He sheathed the profound star sword without a single drop of blood. Chu Mu's expression was calm, as if the person he had just killed was not an impressive person, but a chicken or a duck. Indeed, savage, sword-setting Sun was a very powerful swordsman. He was a strong opponent, and his attainments in swordsmanship were also very high. He had given Chu Mu a thrilling battle, and that was all. Chu Mu was not confident that he could defeat Setting Sun if he were to go all out. He was only confident that he would not be killed by setting Sunday. However, in this situation where his sword aura was restricted, he could only rely on his sword techniques supplemented by his mental state and sword force. Chu Mu was confident that he would not lose out to setting sun in terms of sword intent and sword force. Furthermore, Chu Mu's swordsmanship was superior to setting sun's. Furthermore, he had used Desheng's peak stone tremor force. Although his basic sword techniques could not fully display the power of Desheng's peak stone tremor force, it was enough to crush setting Sunday. Furthermore, Chu Mu had completed the 5th chapter of the heavenly, desolate sword body muscle. His body was 10 times stronger than before. The only reason he was able to fight evenly with Xieyang was because he had suppressed his physical strength. Once he used his physical strength and the power of the stonequake, Xieyang would not be able to fight back. Caught off guard and unable to react in time, under Chu Mu's profound star sword, the infamous remnant sword setting sun died. This result was unacceptable for a moment. All the swordsmen were stunned and could not make a sound. Chu Mu flicked his sword and scabbard at setting sun's left arm. Immediately, the spatial bracelet on his wrist flew into his hand and into his bosom. He then flicked the remnant sun sword into the spatial bracelet. Taking a step forward, Chu Mu walked forward. There were dozens of swordsmen from the Red Clothed Association led by Fu Taisheng. Chu Mu's footsteps woke them up. Their faces were pale as they looked at Chu Mu with eyes full of disbelief and fear. It was as if they had seen a homicidal maniac approaching. They all subconsciously retreated, feeling weak all over. Chu Mu did not say a word. He only glanced at Fu Taisheng indifferently, then swept his gaze across the dozens of swordsmen from the Red Clothed Association. He passed through the path that they subconsciously made way for him. No one dared to draw their sword against Chu Mu. They did not even dare to think about drawing their sword. Like a king, Chu Mu walked through the path that the dozens of swordsmen from the Red Clothed Association had made way for him. He walked through the path that many swordsmen had made way for him as he walked towards the Windward Inn. When Chu Mu's figure disappeared from the inn, the swordsmen on the street could not help but let out cries of surprise. You actually made me feel a trace of pressure. Good. I hope that when the time comes, you can make me feel even more pressure. Fierce, sword-void butcher's long and narrow eyes stared at Chu Mu's figure. Only after Chu Mu had entered the inn and disappeared did he speak in a low voice that only he could hear. Battle intent surged from his body, and his chi soared into the clouds. On the other side, blood sword Funlai's blood was flowing like a long river. Traces of blood chi were spurting out from his body and permeating the surroundings like a blood mist. The Fun blood sword was ready to be unsheathed. The Origin Realm warriors used their own methods to converse. No one knew what they were talking about. All in all, Chu Mu had created a storm in the Demon Shaker City. Killing the members of the Wild Lion Gang and the Red Clothed Association was shocking and had become a topic of conversation. However, compared to the battle record of killing savage sword sunsets, it could not be compared at all. It was like the difference between a Tier 5 storm and a Tier 10 storm. The entire Demon Shaker City was shaken because of Chu Mu. In a short period of time, everything that Chu Mu had done since his arrival in the Demon Shaker City was dug up by the people. It was even changed into many different versions and spread around. It's hard to believe. He looks like he's only in his 20s. He can actually defeat savage sword sunsets in a head-on battle of sword techniques and even kill him. When I saw the battle between him and Savage Sword, I thought that it would be amazing if he could tie with Savage Sword. I never thought that he would be able to kill Savage Sword in the end. Your eyesight is too bad. You didn't see the truth at all. Chu Mu's attainments in sword techniques are even higher than Savage Sword's. Although it looked like he tied with Savage Sword, he was actually hiding his strength. Otherwise, how could he have crushed Savage Sword Sunset's shoulder with a single strike? A swordsman who thought he had good eyesight said in a lecturing tone, "Savage sword's attainments in sword techniques are recognized as the second best in Demon Shaker City." Even Savage Sword was not Chu Mu's opponent. One can only imagine how terrifying Chu Mu's sword techniques are. Perhaps only the number one fiend sword Ghost Fog can compete with Chu Mu in sword techniques. Chu Mu's sword techniques seem to be gentle and all-encompassing. No matter how sharp and tricky Savage sword techniques are, Chu Mu's sword will always block them. Did you notice? From the beginning of the battle to the end, Chu Mu and Savage Sword's robes were not damaged in the slightest. Thinking about the power of the sword wind, even the hard floor would be scratched, yet their robes were undamaged. What did this mean? This meant that not only were their sword techniques incomparably exquisite, but their control of their strength had also reached a profound level. Even the sharp sword wind could not affect them in the slightest. In my opinion, since Chu Mu killed Savage Sword, he should inherit the title of Savage Sword. Suddenly, a busybody suggested, causing everyone to fall silent. No, I don't think that's right. The reason why Savage Sword was called Savage Sword was because of his personality and characteristics. Chu Mu should have a more suitable title for him. After a moment of silence, someone immediately spoke up. Then, what kind of title do you think is suitable for him? According to the characteristics of his sword techniques, in my opinion, Chu Mu's sword techniques are gentle and all-encompassing. However, there is also a heaven-like aura that is incomparably tyrannical. Why don't we use the two words, Heavenly Sword, as his title? Someone spoke in a tone as if he was giving advice. Heavenly Sword. No, Heavenly Sword is indeed a good title, but it's too much. I don't think the current Chu Mu is worthy of such a title. I think Heavenly Sword is a good title. From now on, we'll call him Heavenly Sword Chu Mu. Moreover, with his sword techniques and sword aura at such a young age, he will definitely become a true Heavenly Sword one day. No matter how many people objected, in short, a small number of people spread the word about this title. Thus, from then on, Chu Mu was crowned with the title of Heavenly Sword. When this title spread to the ears of others, it caused different reactions. Ominous Sword Sky Slaughterer, Blood Sword Blazing, Demon Sword Ghostly Mist, Without Remnant, Sword Setting Sun. There is now Heavenly Sword Chu Mu? Heavenly Sword. He has to be alive to bear the responsibility. The Red Shirt Association leader sneered and said, "Activate the next plan." For a time, a storm was brewing in Demon Shaking City. Chu Mu was unaware of what was happening outside because he had already returned to his room in Windward Inn. Sitting on a chair in the guest room, Chu Mu closed his eyes and replayed the battle with Remnant Sword in his mind. As Remnant Sword did not have a right arm, he could only practice the sword with his left hand. Compared to practicing the sword with his right hand, the sword with his left hand was often more strange and tricky. Furthermore, it was abnormally sharp. Coupled with Remnant Sword's personality, the lethality of this sword technique was even more terrifying. This was the second time Chu Mu fought with someone who practiced the sword with his left hand. The first time was back on Earth. Although he won that battle, he was heavily injured. However, in this battle, Chu Mu was not injured at all because he was many times stronger than before. 2 hours later, the battle scene in Chu Mu's mind disappeared. The essence of Remnant Sword's left hand had been thoroughly comprehended by Chu Mu, and he was gradually perfecting his own sword technique. Next, it was time to check the spoils of war. Remnant Sun's sword, an extreme grade sword. In terms of power, it was not inferior to the Sinking Star sword. It was considered one of the more high-end extreme grade swords. Unlike the Sinking Star sword, which was all-round, the Remnant Sun sword could increase the power of metal and fire. Chu Mu could also use it. He made it his first choice for dual sword techniques. Next, he took out Remnant Sword Setting Sun's Spatial Bracer. This was an upper-grade spatial bracer. Chu Mu's upper-grade spatial bracer came from the Heaven Wasteland Palace. Other than this one, he had not seen a second upper-grade spatial bracer. This item was extremely valuable. Even the Qi High Realm sword practitioners only had lower-grade spatial bracers. There were very few sword practitioners who had middle-grade spatial bracers, not to mention upper-grade spatial bracers. Chu Mu could not help but feel excited. Perhaps there were many spoils of war within this upper-grade spatial bracer. Perhaps they would all be valuable. With this kind of anticipation, Chu Mu recognized the upper-grade spatial bracer as its owner. His consciousness entered it. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 422. 5 mid-silver spirit stone cards, 3 low-gold spirit stone cards, 30,000 mid-grade spirit stone cards, and 220,000 low-grade spirit stone cards. In addition, there were also pills for healing blood, external injuries, and sword aura. There were even 2 bottles of precious pills for healing internal injuries. There was also a top-grade sword, the Crimson Flame Sword. It was longer and thinner than the average sword, and its design was extremely exquisite. There seemed to be red flames flowing slowly on the blade, making it more suitable for swordsmen. Chu Mu also found a few mortal-ranked ancient sword arts, an earth-ranked ancient sword art, 2 high mystic sword aura arts, and 1 top-grade mystic sword aura art. These were Sunset's collection, and also Chu Mu's spoils of war. He wore a high-grade and a mid-grade spatial bracelet on his left hand, and a high-grade spatial bracelet on his right hand. All the Spirit Stone cards and Spirit Stone cards went into 1 high-grade spatial bracelet. The swords, sword aura arts, and swordsmanship went into the mid-grade spatial bracelet, and the pills and the like went into another high-grade spatial bracelet. With such a clear classification, it was easier for Chu Mu to take out and use them. Although he didn't discover anything special, his harvest this time wasn't small. Chu Mu couldn't help but let out a smile. A cold glint flashed through his eyes. It seems that the Red Coat Association won't give up. Chu Mu then went to O Qingluo's room to take a look. O Qingluo had just woken up, and most of the blood vessels in his eyes were gone. His spirit was also much better. However, as soon as he woke up, he looked at Chu Mu with dissatisfaction, and immediately pulled out his sword to practice his swordsmanship. If this continued, he would break down before he could master it. Chu Mu frowned slightly, feeling helpless at O Qingluo's stubbornness. Use your sword to attack me. If I take half a step back, you can train however you want in the future. I don't care. But if you can't make me take half a step back, you have to train however I want. Chu Mu said. Oh, Qingluo glanced at Chu Mu and didn't say anything. With your current strength, you are still far from being able to take revenge. According to your current cultivation method, you won't be able to take revenge even in 100 years. Chu Mu added, and according to your current cultivation method, you will collapse before you have the strength to take revenge. O Qingluo still didn't respond. After 3 breaths of time passed, Chu Mu said no more and turned to leave. O Qingluo wasn't his disciple. The reason why Chu Mu was willing to give him pointers on cultivation and swordsmanship was because of his deal with Old Master O. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered. Watch my sword! A cryptic and hoarse voice rang out from behind him. Following that, a fine but fierce sword wind slashed towards him. Chu Mu's body didn't move, but a scene appeared in his mind. O Qingluo was holding a sharp sword and slashing towards him. Even the fine details of the trajectory were clearly presented. O Qingluo's feet didn't move, but his body swayed, causing the sharp sword to miss. O Qingluo immediately changed his sword style, changing it from a slash to a horizontal slash. This reaction speed made Chu Mu secretly applaud. However, in Chu Mu's eyes, O Qingluo's swordsmanship was like a child playing house. Not only did Chu Mu not move, He didn't even turn his body. With his back facing O Qingluo, he dodged O Qingluo's sword again and again, causing his sword to miss every time. After 100 swords, O Qingluo was so tired that his breathing was disordered, and his face was covered in sweat. This was more exhausting than when he was practicing his swordsmanship because of Chu Mu's dodging. If he wanted to force Chu Mu to take half a step back, he had to be fully focused. Subconsciously, he had to be more focused than before. Moreover, he had to make his swordsmanship more unpredictable. Both the mental and physical exhaustion were much more than before. Feeling that O Qingluo's sword had lost its strength, Chu Mu turned around and gently pinched the sword with his fingers. The sword didn't move at all. O Qingluo struggled a few more times, but he felt that his sword was stuck in steel and couldn't move at all. In the end, he had no choice but to give up temporarily. Your swordsmanship talent is not bad. The choice is up to you. Chu Mu loosened his fingers and said indifferently. O Qingluo looked at Chu Mu and nodded after 3 breaths. I will listen to you in the future. As long as I can become stronger, I will take my revenge. O Qingluo's first target for revenge was the Red Clothed Association, and then the people who destroyed the O family. He only knew a little about it, but he didn't know who the real mastermind was. He still needed to investigate, and everything needed to be done with enough power. In the following 2 days, aside from his own cultivation, Chu Mu would take out 2 hours every day to instruct O Qingluo in his cultivation. O Qingluo was very cooperative. His sword aura's improvement wasn't obvious, but his sword technique's improvement could be seen. O Qingluo's swordsmanship talent was not bad, and he could barely be called a genius. On the 3rd day, Chu Mu was training in his room. The training of the heavenly Yuan sword chi had become very slow. It was still at the small success of the Chi-Hai realm, and was still very far from the peak. The comprehension of the poetic perspective was not fast either, and there was a slight improvement. The comprehension of the sword force was even slower than the poetic perspective. The stone-shaking power was at the peak of the Deshang, and Chu Mu felt that it would be very difficult for him to break through to the peak. However, he had started to train the 3rd movement of the Broken Star sword art. Chu Mu was sitting cross-legged on his bed, training the 6th movement of the Heavenly Desolate sword body. The pure Heavenly Desolate chi from the ancient Heavenly Desolate pellet covered the surface of his skin under the control of an even more powerful mind. The skin that was exposed outside of his clothes was shining with a light yellowish-brown color. After half an hour, Chu Mu had finished training. The 6th movement, the skin movement, was not as difficult as the muscle movement, but it was not any less difficult than the bone movement. Chu Mu estimated that it would take him at least a month to complete the skin movement. Bang, 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 someone knocked on the door of his room. The knocking was short and hurried, which meant that the person who knocked on the door was not in a good mood and was very anxious. Flicking out a strand of sword chi, the door latch was opened again. The door was immediately pushed open by someone, and a figure rushed in with a whoosh. A pair of eyes shot out a sharp glint as they anxiously swept across the room before finally landing on Chu Mu. "Chu Mu, come with me quickly," the person said in a hurry. His figure flashed and appeared in front of Chu Mu. He stretched out a hand to grab Chu Mu. Chu Mu frowned slightly. His protective sword chi blocked the person's hand and bounced it away. The person staggered back a few steps. "Take another step and I'll kill you," Chu Mu said indifferently. A strand of killing intent locked onto the person. Just as the person was about to approach again, he was locked onto by Chu Mu's killing intent. His body stiffened and his blood almost froze. A chill swept through his body. Only then did he remember that this person was the person who killed Broken Sword Setting Sunday. He was known as Heavenly Sword outside. He was not someone he could fight against. "I am the Iron Sword Gang's Vice Gang Master, Han Sheng. The Gang Master has been captured by the Red Shirt Association. They said that they will only release the Gang Master if you appear." Han Sheng quickly explained. With a bang, he knelt down and kowtowed to Chu Mu. I beg you, please save the gangmaster. Even if you want my life, I am willing to do it. Han, Yi has been captured by the Red Shirt Association. Chu Mu did not immediately reply. He was considering the situation. There was no conflict between the Iron Sword Gang and the Red Shirt Association. Moreover, the Red Shirt Association had stated that they would only release Han Yi if Shifeng appeared. This point alone was enough to prove that Han Ye's capture was directly related to him. Perhaps when he was surrounded by the two swordsmen from the Red Shirt Association, Han Ye's appearance had caused the Red Shirt Association to hold a grudge against him. In order to deal with me, the Red Shirt Association is willing to resort to any means. Chu Mu sneered inwardly. He got off the bed and looked at Han Sheng, who was still kneeling on the ground. Lead the way. Han Sheng was stunned. Originally, he had only come to find Chu Mu to give it a try. Subconsciously, he believed that Chu Mu would not appear. After all, the Red Shirt Association was a powerful force. Good, good. Han Sheng hurriedly got up. He appeared extremely excited as he hurried past Chu Mu to lead the way. Outside the Windward Inn, there was a group of swordsmen from the Iron Sword Gang. There were more than 10 of them. When they saw Han Sheng appear, they immediately went forward to greet him. After a while, Chu Mu appeared as well. The members of the Iron Sword Gang all looked at Chu Mu. The members of the Iron Sword Gang knew Han Ye's personality. They did not find it strange that Han Ye would appear to help Chu Mu. However, after Han Yi had been captured by the Red Shirt Association, they felt a trace of dissatisfaction towards Chu Mu. They felt that if it weren't for Chu Mu, Han Yi would not have been captured by the Red Shirt Association. Now that Chu Mu was willing to appear, the dissatisfaction in their hearts disappeared and was replaced by gratitude. At the same time, they sighed inwardly. Heavenly Sword Chu Mu was so young. Seeing was believing. Let's go. Chu Mu glanced at them. The dozen or so swordsmen of the Iron Sword Gang were all at the energy transformation stage. Han Sheng was at the peak of the energy transformation stage. The weakest of the dozen or so was at the initial level of the energy transformation stage. Most of them were at the energy transformation stage, Deshang. Han Sheng and the dozen or so swordsmen of the Iron Sword Gang quickly led the way for Chu Mu. When Chu Mu appeared on the street, he immediately attracted the attention of many. Look, he is Heavenly Sword Chu Mu. You flatter me. So young. Chu Mu was somewhat confused. Since killing Broken Sword, he had been staying in the inn. He did not know what was going on in the outside world. One of the members of the Iron Sword Gang quickly explained. After some explanation, Chu Mu came to a realization. He felt somewhat helpless. Killing Broken Sword had earned him the title of Heavenly Sword. To Chu Mu, this was a small matter. He was more concerned about the Red Clothed Association. He took this opportunity to ask about the Red Clothed Association. It was possible that a battle would be unavoidable. Han Sheng also knew the importance of this matter. He ordered his men to return to the Iron Sword Gang and gather all the members of the Iron Sword Gang. At the same time, he explained to Chu Mu the structure and strength of the Red Clothed Association. There are many powerful warriors in the Red Dress Association. There are the Red Dress Corps and the Blood Dress Corps. The Red Dress Corps is the main force of the Red Dress Association. Every one of them is at the peak of the Qi-shaping realm, and some of them have even reached the Qi-high realm. The Blood Regalia Legion is the elite force of the Red Coat Association. Every single one of them has sword Qi at the completion of the Qi-high realm. The best of them are even at the peak of the Qi-high realm. Han Sheng said seriously, besides this, the Red Clothed Association also has a sword formation called the 8-Direction Cloud Rain Sword Formation. 8 Red Clothed Regiment Guards who have reached the peak of the energy transformation stage can kill a beginning stage sword artist and fight against a lower stage sword artist. It is extremely powerful. If the blood clothed regiment guards were to set up the 8-direction cloud rain sword formation. Its power would be unimaginable. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 4:23. As the deputy chief of the Iron Sword Gang, Han Sheng was very familiar with the demon-shaking city. They walked in a straight line and soon arrived in front of the Red Coat Association with Chu Mu. The Red Coat Association occupied a much larger area than the Wild Lion Gang. The walls and gates were taller and more majestic than the Wild Lion Gang's. However, the walls and gates of the Red Coat Association were all red and looked very dazzling. Outside the red gates of the Red Coat Association stood 4 swordsmen with swords on their backs. Each of them had the cultivation of qi transforming to sheng. They were all expressionless as they stared outside. When Chu Mu and the swordsmen of the Iron Sword Gang approached, the 4 swordsmen's eyes suddenly flashed with cold lightning. "Sir Sky Sword, please wait for a moment. Let us all arrive first before we act." Han Sheng said. Han Yi had been captured. The Iron Sword Gang and the Red Coat Association had become enemies. According to the Red Coat Association's style of doing things, even if they released Han Yi this time, they would most likely find other opportunities to attack the Iron Sword Gang in the future. They would weaken the Iron Sword Gang and eventually lead to the destruction of the Iron Sword Gang. Unless the Iron Sword Gang was willing to submit to the Red Coat Association, disband and join the Red Coat Association, or become a vassal of the Red Coat Association, the result would be the same. Since that was the case, they might as well take advantage of the fact that the Sky Sword Gang was here to fight against the Red Coat Association. It had to be said that this was a very crazy method. If they were not careful, the Iron Sword Gang would disappear. However, to the members of the Iron Sword Gang, they would rather die in battle and be destroyed than wag their tails and beg for mercy from the Red Coats Association. The reason why the Iron Sword Gang was able to develop was because of its unparalleled unity. No matter what kind of difficulties they faced, the entire gang would not back down. It was because of their unity that they were able to survive until today. Therefore, the other factions all knew the Iron Sword Gang style. If there were no benefits involved, they would not want to have any conflicts with the Iron Sword Gang to avoid unnecessary losses. But sometimes conflicts were unavoidable. "You all wait here," Chu Mu said as he strode forward. This was the grudge between him and the Red Coat Association. He needed to resolve it personally. In other words, no matter how many swordsmen the Iron Sword Gang had, it would not be of much help to him. It was just more people. Unless the Iron Sword Gang had 8 or 10 Chi High swordsmen, this was not the world of ordinary people, but the world of swordsmen. A powerful swordsman could even fight against 1,000 swordsmen. Numbers did not mean strength. "I'm Chu Mu." Walking towards the Red Coat Group's entrance, Chu Mu spoke directly. The 4 swordsmen were first startled, but they quickly opened the vermilion door. One person brought Chu Mu in, while the other 3 closed the vermilion door. They sneered at the Iron Sword Gang people, their eyes full of provocation. It was as if they were saying that if the Iron Sword Gang dared to make a move, they would die without a doubt. The members of the Red Coat Association had already made the arrangements. The meeting would be held in the main hall. Other than Fu Taisheng, there were a few other people in the hall. The one sitting high up in the hall was naturally the leader of the Red Clothed Association. The sword chi he was emitting was at the peak of the Chi High realm. There were also 2 other people who emitted sword chi that were at the peak of the Chi High realm. What a rare guest! To think that Sky Sword would come in person. Your presence brings light to the Red Coat Society's humble dwelling. The leader of the Red Coat Association laughed. He sounded very happy, but he did not stand up to greet Sky Sword. It was obviously different from what he said. The other people stared at Chu Mu with sneers on their faces. It was as if they wanted to see if Chu Mu had 3 heads and 6 arms. He dared to go against the Red Coat Association time and time again. Their sword chi cultivation was higher than Chumu's, so they could immediately tell that Chumu's sword chi was at the low level of the chi high realm. Although the sword chi cultivation of the low level of the chi high realm was not bad, there were at least 80 members of the Red Coat Association who were at this level. It was nothing. As for the so-called sky sword, in their eyes he was just a joke. Thinking about the murderous sword, blood sword, Funlai, and the others, which one of them did not have the sword chi cultivation of the peak of the chi high realm. They were all terrifyingly strong and could easily kill a normal sword warrior at the peak of the chi high realm. On the other hand, the man before him only possessed slightly better swordsmanship than Remnant, sword-setting Sunday. If it were a battle of true strength, he might not even be able to block a single strike from setting Sunday. Yet, he dared to call himself Heavenly Sword. Chumu did not know what they were thinking, but he could see the disdain in their eyes. He did not care about it at all. The more they looked down on him, the more they would regret it in the end. Since you have brought light to my humble dwelling, then why don't you let Han Yi out? Chu-Mu followed the leader's words and said directly. No matter if it was the leader of the Red Coat Association or the others, they were all shocked. They did not expect Chu-Mu to answer in such a way. The words that they had prepared were all useless. Luckily, they were all people who had been through a lot, so they immediately reacted. Let Han Yi out, that's easy. But are you ready? The leader of the Red Coat Association said with a cold smile on his face. Since Chu-Mu was so direct, then there was no need for him to beat around the bush and pretend to be nice. It was better to just get straight to the point. What do you want? Chu-Mu asked. He vaguely guessed that the Red Coat Association wanted the piece of paper that recorded the skyquake sword forging technique. However, since it was in Chu-Mu's hands, he was unwilling to hand it over. You sure know how to play dumb. The leader of the Red Coat Association sneered. Listen up. Everything that belongs to the grandfather and grandson, including broken sword setting sun's spatial bracer and everything inside it. In addition, you have killed many of our members. You also have to hand over the intermediate beast seal pearl with the wind-winged dragon as compensation. The leader of the Red Coat Association was really demanding an exorbitant price. From the moment I entered this place, you had no intention of letting me walk out alive, right? Chu-Mu did not answer. Instead, he said something else. It's easy to talk to smart people. Regardless of whether you hand it over or not, you will die here. Once you die, everything you have on you will belong to our guild. The leader of the Red Coat Association laughed loudly. The other three, including Fu Taixing, laughed loudly as well. It was as if Chu-Mu had already become their prisoner, waiting to be slaughtered. Just as their laughter rang out, a series of wind-breaking sounds rang out. Immediately after, figures flashed and flew over from the surroundings, forming an encirclement that surrounded Chu-Mu. This move let Chu-Mu know that the Red Coat Association had already made preparations and were waiting for him to come to their door. The Red Coat Association was not bound by the rules of Demon Shaker City. They could use their sword chi at will and display all their strength. There were a total of 8 people surrounding Chu-Mu. Each of them looked to be in their 30s or 40s. They were expressionless and had sharp eyes. They wore dark red robes, which were darker than the robes worn by the Red Coat Association's swordsmen. Each of them held a dark red sword in their hands, which gave off a threatening aura. These 8 swordsmen were all at the Chi High realm. Deshang's sword chi was very close. Their chi came from the same source. It was obvious that they practiced the same sword chi art. In an instant, Chu-Mu came to a conclusion. These 8 people were the elite force of the Red Coat Association, the Regalia Legion. According to Han Sheng, the Regalia Legion was not large in number. Including the commander, there were only 33 of them. Normally, they would not be mobilized. Once they were mobilized, it was either against a strong enemy or for a major event. For the Red Coat Association, Chu-Mu was of great importance. In order to prevent any accidents, they sent a team of Regalia Legion. Every single one of the Regalia Legion grew up in the midst of blood and fire. Every single one of them is extremely powerful, enough to fight against a normal sword warrior at the peak of Chi Hai. 8 of them working together can easily kill a normal sword warrior at the peak of Chi Hai. The leader of the Red Coat Association sat calmly on the high seat, looking down at Chu Mu with a cold gaze. His tone carried a hint of mockery. I can give you a chance. Take the initiative to hand over everything and leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, you will die of 1,000 cuts. The 8 Regalia Legion's eyes were filled with killing intent as they stared at Chu Mu. They did not blink. Their bodies were motionless, but their aura was constantly condensing. They were only waiting for an order to launch an earth-shattering attack. A normal Chi Hai realm swordsman, even if they had the sword chi of a Chi Hai realm swordsman, would find it difficult to breathe under this kind of pressure. It was as if they were looking at a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood surging towards them. Chu Mu's expression did not change. His body was straight, and his back was like a sword. His aura surrounded his body like a sharp sword. He was not affected in the slightest by the killing intent of the 8 Regalia Legion. Kill! Seeing Chu Mu's appearance, the leader of the Red Coat Association felt a chill in his heart and quickly shouted. The 8 Regalia Legions, dark red, long swords trembled and turned into 8 dark red streaks of light that pierced towards Chu Mu from 8 different directions. Their movements were uniform. When the swords were half a meter away from Chu Mu, the dark red lights trembled again and turned into 8 blooming flowers of blood that enveloped Chu Mu's body. Not only did the Regalia Legion practice the same sword chi arts, but they also practiced the same ancient sword arts. This ensured that when they attacked together, their power would be maximized. 8 swords, 8 Earth-class ancient sword arts with frightening power. They even resonated with each other, causing the air around Chu Mu to solidify. Chu Mu only felt his body being affected, as if he was being pulled by an invisible force. If it were anyone else in this situation, even the accuracy of their attacks would be affected. Unfortunately, their opponent was Chu Mu, the one with the tyrannical body of Chu Mu. With a move of his right hand, the profound star sword was unsheathed at an indescribable speed. One sword split into 8, and 8 swift and fierce sword winds swept out. A frightening sword pressure spread out in all directions. The heavenly origin sword chi tore through the sword intent, stone shaking, and 1% perfect sword force. Each sword was aimed at the weakest point of the blood blossoms. Popping sounds seemed to ring out at the same time. The 8 blood blossoms rushing towards Chu Mu burst like bubbles, turning into wisps of blood that dissipated. The powerful sword energy pierced through the enemy's sword tips and headed straight for their palms. The 8 Regalia Legions' faces flashed with shock. They hastily changed their sword moves, but they were once again broken by Chu Mu. Chu Mu's body swayed, and in an instant he changed a few dozen times. Chu Mu quickly struck out with his sword, and a terrifying sword pressure crushed in all directions. The sword energy was inconceivably tyrannical. The surrounding tables and chairs were all shattered, and the ground was cut open with sword scars. The 8 blood Regalia Royal Guards were already injured. Set up the formation. Quickly set up the formation. The leader of the Red Coat Association hastily shouted in alarm. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 4:24. Chu Mu's strength was beyond the expectations of the Scarlet Cloth Association's leader. Seeing that the 8 Deshang Blood Regalia Legion couldn't do anything to Chu Mu, he hastily shouted and ordered them to set up the formation. The 8 Regalia Legion guards immediately held their swords in front of their chests. Their footsteps quickly moved in a circle, faster and faster. After 3 breaths of time, they had turned into 8 bloody lights, almost as if they were one. If one looked down from above, it would look like a rapidly rotating blood red circle had surrounded Chumu. Chumu discovered that the auras of the 8 Regalia Legion guards had merged into one. They were indistinguishable from each other, as if they were coming from the same person. The Regalia Legion guards practiced the same sword chi arts and sword arts, causing their sword auras to be almost identical. But since they were all different cultivators, there would still be subtle differences. Even if there weren't any differences, they could still be distinguished by their relationship with each other. Now, once the formation was set up, the 8 auras of the same origin had merged together, becoming one and indistinguishable. Although the 8 Regalia Legion guards had yet to attack, Chumu could already feel a trace of danger permeating the air, enveloping his entire body. It was as if every part of his body could receive a fatal blow. This feeling was very strange and uncomfortable. Chumu narrowed his eyes, his pupils slightly contracting. A cold light flashed through his eyes. Even at perfect sword vision, he could only see 8 blurry blood-red figures moving at high speed. This shouldn't be happening. With Chumu's perfect sword vision, he should be able to clearly see his opponents no matter how fast they moved. But now he could only see blurry figures. This wasn't because of speed, but because of something else. Looking carefully, Chumu finally discovered that there were traces of blood-red, cloud-like aura surrounding the 8 blood-red figures. He couldn't be sure, but Chumu felt that it was because of the aura that his perfect vision sword was greatly weakened. Guildmaster, once the sword array is activated, Chumu is dead for sure, Fu Taixing said to the red shirt guildmaster with a smile as he watched the sword array. The red shirt guildmaster did not reply. Instead, he smiled and nodded. He was very confident in the 8 directional cloud rain sword formation. The reason why the Red Coat Association was able to survive the crisis after crisis was closely related to the 8-sided cloud rain sword formation. It could be said that without the 8-sided cloud rain sword formation, the Red Coat Association's overall strength would drop by at least 30% or more. Speaking of which, the Red Coat Association was very lucky to have obtained the 8 directional cloud rain sword array. At least in the Eastern Sword domain, sword arrays were very rare, and most of them were low-level sword arrays. For example, the 8 directional cloud rain sword array belonged to the lowest grade of sword arrays, yellow grade sword array. Even if it was the lowest grade sword array, once it was mastered, it could unleash a terrifying power. It could easily kill a strong enemy who was above a grade. No matter if it was Fu Taixing or the Red Shirt Guildmaster or anyone else, they all agreed that once the 8-sided Cloud Rain Sword Array was activated, Chumu would die for sure, even if his sword chi had reached the peak of the Chi High Realm. They sat calmly on the chairs with a sinister smile in their eyes. It was as if they could see a corpse full of holes after the sword array was dispersed. Within the sword array, Chumu held his breath. He knew very little about sword arrays, and this was the first time he was facing one. He could not be careless. Suddenly, Chumu felt his vision blur. From the blood-red figure moving at high speed, 8 blood-red cold lights shot through the air. The speed was so fast that it was hard to defend against. Chumu's reaction was even faster. He shook the profound star sword and it split into 8, turning into 8 cold stars that flew into the sky. The 8 cold stars shattered the 8 blood-red cold lights. The blood-red cold lights exploded and turned into countless blood-red lights. They shot towards Chumu like rain, covering every inch of his body. The protective sword chi was strengthened, and the feathery pattern armor was activated. Chumu used the Flying Goose Phantom Steps to move at high speed within a small area. He was restricted by the 8-sided Cloud Rain sword array and could not leave. He could only move within a small area, so he had no choice but to use the Flying Goose Phantom Steps to its limit. He could move his profound star sword and shatter one blood-red light after another. Even so, there were still too many blood-red lights. Chumu could only shatter half of them and dodge some of them. About a quarter of the blood-red lights hit Chumu. The strengthened protective sword chi was torn apart, and the feathery pattern armor was also shattered. The last layer of invisible protective sword chi was also penetrated by the blood-red lights. The power of the blood-red lights was greatly weakened. They pierced through Chumu's moon-white robe, creating needle-sized holes. A part of them hit the feathery pattern armor and shattered it. The other part shot into Chumu's body. Chumu only felt waves of pain coming from many parts of his body. It was as if he had been pierced by dozens of needles. His whole body twitched slightly. These blood-red lights not only had needle-like sharpness, but also contained traces of strange power. They were tricky and difficult to deal with. They desperately tried to drill into his body to cause damage. However, Chumu had already mastered the muscle chapter of the Sky Wasteland sword body. His powerful muscle power erupted, and in an instant, the blood-red lights that were about to pierce his skin and cause damage were all shattered. The effects of cultivating the Sky Wasteland sword body also manifested. The dozens of needle-sized wounds on his skin quickly healed. In less than 10 breaths of time, it was back to normal, as if he had never been injured. During this time, the Blood Regalia Legion of the 8 Directional Cloud Rain Sword Formation launched another attack. The attack power was even stronger than the first time. The blood-red lights were countless. The blood-red aura diffused and shrouded the surroundings. It affected Chumu's senses and affected his judgment. Every blood-red light was more condensed than before, and its power was also more powerful. Chumu brandished his sword to block. He also used the Flying Swan illusory steps to perform a small area high-frequency shift. The protective sword chi appeared again and strengthened. The feathery pattern armor's protective shield was activated again. His essence, energy, and spirit were raised to the extreme. With the experience of the first attack, Chumu was able to avoid and shatter the majority of the blood-red lights. The blood-red aura was unable to cause any obvious disturbance to him. There were still dozens of blood-red lights that hit Chumu's body. They once again pierced through the moon-white robe and hit his skin. Once again, they caused injuries. The blood-red lights that wanted to penetrate into his flesh were shattered by the power of his muscles. His skin quickly recovered. The third wave of attack came again. It was still the same blood-red aura and blood-red lights, but the blood-red lights were more condensed and their power increased. Using his sword arts and the Flying Swan illusory steps to block and dodge, Chumu once again withstood the third wave of attack. He also tried to send out a few sword chi, but the result was that they disappeared without a trace. At this point, Chumu finally understood the profundity of the 8 Directional Cloud Rain sword formation. It was wave after wave of attacks. Moreover, each wave of attacks would be stronger than the previous wave. The interval between the next wave of attacks and the previous wave of attacks was very short at the beginning, but as the number of waves increased, the interval would increase with the increase in power. Once the 8 Directional Cloud Rain sword formation was activated, the first wave of attack was 8 blood-red cold lights. If it did not work, then it would turn into countless blood-red lights. This level of attack was enough to kill a lot of Deshang sword warriors of the Chi-Hai realm, and even threaten a peak Chi-Hai sword warrior. Once the blood-red lights pierced into the skin, if one did not have any special defense, then one's body would be damaged to a certain extent, causing one's overall power to decrease. The second wave of blood-red lights was a bit more powerful than the first wave. It was not a lot, but with the interference of the blood-red aura, the subsequent waves of blood-red lights would become more powerful, and the interference of the blood-red aura would become more and more serious. Think about it. If one did not have any special defense, after the blood-red lights entered one's body, it would cause damage. Even if the damage from one blood-red light was not obvious, dozens or hundreds of them would still be very scary. After accumulating for so many times, even if the interval between each wave of attack was longer, the sword warrior who was attacked would need more time to recover, and the next wave of attack would be even more powerful. Plus, his attacks would be weakened by the strange blood-red aura, and would not be able to cause any effective damage to the person who set up the sword formation. Soon, he would die under this sword formation. Because it was his first time encountering a sword formation, Chu-Mu tried to attack a few times, but to no avail. He then focused on using his sword arts and the flying swan illusory steps to dodge the attacks. Not only could he train his sword arts and the flying swan illusory steps, he could also see the secrets of this sword formation. This Chu-Mu is really surprising. He can actually hold on until now and still not die. The red, clothed association leader and the others were surprised. They all knew the power of the 8-directional cloud rain sword formation, and they had all tried it themselves. Even with the red, clothed association leader's powerful strength and all kinds of skills, he could only hold on until the 6th wave of attacks. But now, Chu-Mu was able to hold on until the 5th wave. Although they did not know how serious his injuries were, the fact that he was able to hold on until now was enough to prove his strength. His sword chi was only at the low chi-high realm. If his sword chi could reach the peak of the chi-high realm, then he would be even more powerful than the red, clothed association leader. After defending against the 6th wave of blood-colored fine rays, Chu-Mu activated his muscle strength and shattered the invading blood-colored fine rays. This time he only felt waves of pain from the places he was hit by the blood-colored fine rays, and the recovery of his skin was even slower than before. It's about time. I have completely understood the secrets of this sword formation, and my flying swan illusory steps has also improved a little. Chu-Mu thought to himself and started to prepare to break the sword formation. He knew that the blood-red aura of this sword formation could not only disturb the swordsman, it could also quickly weaken the attacks. Unless the power of the attack was strong enough to exceed the limit of what the sword formation could withstand. The 7th wave of blood-colored fine beams shot over from all directions. Chu-Mu raised his profound star sword and abruptly chopped down. Stone-shaking wave sword, full power. An ear-piercing, buzzing sound was heard. The red, clothed association leader and the others who were outside of the sword formation felt their scalps go numb and their bodies tremble. They felt very uneasy. The profound star sword slashed down, and a cracking sound was heard, like glass breaking. The thread-like blood-red aura was immediately shattered by the sword before it could do anything. The air vibrated at a high speed, and the surrounding blood-red light was shattered in an instant. With one slash, the dark gold color was like a broken moon in the sky. It cut open the blood-red light circle, and 8 dark red figures flew out as if they'd been hit by a mammoth. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.